Chapter 1862. After pulling out the spear, Zhao Fu could sense the immense power within it. This was a power that had been sealed for a long time, and it could cause the heavens and earth to change. It was definitely a terrifying item. If he could use this item as a legacy item for the Pantheon Palace, the effects would be quite shocking. Zhao Fu gave a trace of a smile as the abnormal signs around him gradually calmed down, and the forbidden area's power seemed to gradually disappear. At that moment, Zhao Fu found out what kind of power was causing him to continuously fly in circles. There was a power here that could disrupt one's senses, which was why even if one had been flying west, that power would cause one to circle back to where one had started. As for the monsters living here, they were not affected at all. Congratulations, godly spirit. Seeing that Zhao Fu was fine after pulling out the terrifying spear, the elderly man felt quite shocked and immediately came over to congratulate him. Zhao Fu smiled and nodded before taking out a piece of legacy equipment and throwing it to the elderly man as he said, "I said that I would give you benefits. This is what I promised." The elderly man caught the equipment in delight, but after thinking about it, he looked quite troubled as he said, "Godly spirit, can this lowly one not accept the equipment and exchange it for a place where you can protect us?" Apart from being able to hypnotize others with their voices, these monsters were quite weak. Without the protection of the forbidden area, they would quickly die. Hearing this, Zhao Fu felt that this was a small matter, so he nodded and agreed. The elderly man was delighted and hurriedly thanked Zhao Fu. Zhao Fu told him to lead his people to the Jade Goddess territory and to remind them to control the Jade Goddess territory. If they harmed ordinary residents, they would be severely punished. The elderly man nodded and promised that he would not harm the innocent residents before quickly leaving. He planned to take his people to pack up and head to a new place of protection. Zhao Fu held the spear and flew out of the forbidden area and came before the two goddesses. Seeing Zhao Fu fly out with the stone spear, the Jade Goddess and Iron Goddess understood that the matter in the forbidden area had been resolved and that Zhao Fu had obtained what he wanted. The Jade Goddess gave a trace of a smile as she looked at the stone spear and said, "This thing is so powerful. Is it what formed this forbidden area?" Zhao Fu replied with a smile, "Yeah, I also plan to use it as a legacy item. It should have a very powerful effect." The goddess of iron and stone frowned slightly and said seriously, "The power of the stone spear is a bit too evil. Is it suitable as a legacy item?" Zhao Fu thought about it and said, "This stone spear's attributes won't be like this in the future. It will need to be nurtured by the 10,000 god legacy and become a 10,000 god spear. Not only will it have evil power, but it will also have other powers." The goddess of iron and rock nodded in understanding. After that, Zhao Fu brought the two goddesses back to the temple of the Jade Goddess. By now, Zhao Fu had ordered people to build the Pantheon Palace, which is a hall that could hold over 10,000 statues. The building was incredibly big, and there was a platform in the middle that was responsible for placing legacy items. There would also be statues of gods around it. That would be the future Pantheon Palace, where countless gods resided, and it would be the core of the entire faction. The statues there were not ordinary statues either. They were statues that had the strongest connection with the gods. They were usually the first statues that were placed after a god became a god, and they had the greatest divine power. Zhao Fu would use their divine power to continuously nurture the 10,000 god spear. When that time came, the 10,000 god spear's power would surpass ordinary people's imaginations. However, there was no need to think too much about it for now. Zhao Fu had only subdued 2 gods, and he was still a long way from being able to subdue 10,000 gods. Now it was time to fuse with the legacy. Zhao Fu came to a platform that had just been built and stabbed the stone spear into the groove at the center. Following this, he took a few steps back and stretched out a hand towards the spear. Boom! An explosion sounded out as a massive aura spread out, and a massive wave of legacy power flowed out from Zhao Fu's palm. It was a green and black power, and after flowing out, it continuously entered the stone spear in the ground. The stone spear was not simple at all, and it continuously absorbed the legacy power without reacting at all. After a while, Zhao Fu stopped. It was not that the stone spear was not powerful enough, but that it was too powerful. It was not enough to fuse with 2 godly spirit legacies. It needed at least 3 godly spirit legacies before it could become a legacy spear. Zhao Fu asked the jade goddess next to him, "Are there any other godly spirits nearby? It's best if they're related to ores." Before the jade goddess could speak, the iron goddess replied, "There's also the metal god, silver god, and bronze god. The one with the strongest power and faction is the metal god. It's also the largest faction here." Hearing this, Zhao Fu nodded and said, "Tell me where it is. I'll go right now." After the iron goddess told Zhao Fu turned into a ray of light and disappeared over the horizon. Boom! In the air above a shining golden palace, a massive aura suddenly descended, and a massive might covered the entire city. Countless people felt terror as they looked up into the sky, and a cloaked figure appeared in the sky. A valiant-looking big man dressed in golden clothes furiously walked out from the god palace and looked at Zhao Fu in the sky as he said, "Who are you? You dare to barge into my territory and act so fearlessly?" Zhao Fu gave a trace of condescension as he stood in the sky and looked down at the big man as he said, "I'll give you 2 choices. Either you die or you submit." The big man felt furious and exploded out with a powerful godly spirit aura as he held a large golden saber and rushed at Zhao Fu. The other godly spirit soldiers gathered from all directions and surrounded this place. The big man quickly arrived in front of Zhao Fu and sent a massive wave of divine power into his saber, causing it to give off an intense golden saber chi as he vigorously slashed toward Zhao Fu. Zhao Fu took out the Emperor Killing Sword and sent a wave of power into it, blocking in front of him. Clang! A metallic collision sound rang out as Zhao Fu's sword blocked the big man's saber, causing a gale to spread out. The metallic god was indeed more powerful than the jade goddess and iron goddess, but he was not a match for Zhao Fu. Zhao Fu looked at the metallic god and smirked as an even more powerful aura exploded out from his body, and he pushed his sword towards the metallic god. The metallic god did not believe that Zhao Fu was so powerful, and he roared as he exploded out with an even more powerful aura and pressed towards Zhao Fu with his golden saber. Bang! Chapter 1863. Swish, swish, swish. The countless soldiers below could tell that their godly spirit was not a match for Zhao Fu, and they shot out arrows that contained immense power toward Zhao Fu. Zhao Fu unleashed a defensive barrier, blocking the countless arrows. The arrows hit the barrier but were unable to affect it at all, and there was not even a crack on it. Ark! The metallic god roared as an even more terrifying power exploded out from his body. He gripped his saber with both hands and sent powerful power into it, causing the saber to give off an intense golden saber light. Boom! The metallic god vigorously slashed out, and an enormous golden saber light containing enough power to slash apart everything slashed toward Zhao Fu, as if nothing could stop it. Zhao Fu gave a disdainful smile and raised his sword. He sent a powerful wave of power into it, causing the Emperor Killing Sword to give off an intense sword light. He vigorously slashed out, and an enormous black crescent brought with it an intense wind as it slashed out. Bang! The 2 attacks collided, resulting in a massive sound. The ferocious golden saber light was shattered by the sword light, turning into motes of light and dissipating. The black sword light continued onwards, slashing the metallic god to the ground and opening up a massive crater. Boom! A massive explosion sounded out as 600,000 or so golden-armored soldiers exploded out with a golden aura. The golden aura gathered together and formed a golden hammer that was nearly 100 meters wide. The soldiers controlled the golden hammer and raised it high into the air, and it gave off terrifying destructive power as it smashed toward Zhao Fu from the side. Zhao Fu's expression did not change at all. He gripped his fist and gathered power as he vigorously punched out. Bang! The golden hammer was blasted apart by Zhao Fu's punch, and the boundless golden aura turned into a wild gale. The golden armored soldiers coughed up a mouthful of blood, and their faces became pale. The golden hammer was connected to their bodies. Zhao Fu looked at the countless soldiers and raised his sword. He vigorously slashed out, and a sword hum sounded out as an enormous black sword light containing terrifying power slashed towards the soldiers. Puff, puff, puff. As the black sword light slashed out, countless soldiers were cut down like weeds. Countless soldiers' bodies were cut open, and blood sprayed everywhere, dyeing the ground red. Zhao Fu gave a cold smile and once again swung his sword, sending out sword lights and slaughtering those soldiers. Boom! A massive aura rushed toward Zhao Fu, and Zhao Fu blocked with his sword. Clang! The metallic god looked furious, and his body gave off a golden light. Zhao Fu's gaze became cold as he vigorously slashed out, once again sending the metallic god flying. He gave off a powerful aura as he chased after it and raised his sword, slashing down with terrifying sword energy. Bang! The god of metallic stone was slashed to the ground, smashing heavily into a crater, creating a crater that was over 10 meters wide. There was also a massive wound on its chest, from which blood kept gushing out. By now, the metallic god was heavily injured and had become incredibly weak, and he did not even have the strength to crawl up. Zhao Fu flew down from the sky and landed next to the metallic god as he coldly laughed and said, "I gave you a chance before, but you asked for it." The metallic god looked at Zhao Fu furiously as if he wanted to chop up Zhao Fu and feed him to dogs. Zhao Fu squatted down and gathered a wave of power in his palm as he grabbed towards the metallic god's abdomen. His hand pierced into the metallic god's abdomen, causing blood to fly everywhere. Arg! The metallic god howled in pain as Zhao Fu grabbed a golden rhombus-shaped stone and pulled out his blood-stained hand. The metallic god's power quickly declined because what Zhao Fu had taken out of his body was his godhood. After suffering such terrifying injuries and having his godhood extracted by Zhao Fu, the metallic god was on the verge of death and did not have any power left. The jade goddesses and iron goddesses quickly arrived with their armies. Looking at the corpses on the ground and the metallic god's pitiful state, they could not help but feel afraid. Zhao Fu's methods had been incredibly savage. If they had not chosen to submit, they might have ended up like the metallic god. By now, the metallic god's life force had been completely drained and he had died. There was a look of unwillingness and hatred on his face. Zhao Fu sent a wave of power into the golden godhood, obliterating the metallic god's remnant soul within it, and he started to forcefully absorb the legacy power. The golden divinity gave off an intense light as the divine power within it was continuously absorbed by Zhao Fu. After a while, a golden aura flame exploded out of Zhao Fu's body, and he had successfully absorbed the divinity's legacy power. By now, the jade goddesses and iron goddesses people had taken control of this place, and they had brought a woman and a young man. From what the jade goddess had said, the woman was the metallic god's wife, and the young man was the metallic god's son. Zhao Fu's gaze fell on the woman. She was quite beautiful and had a tall and slim figure, and she gave off a noble aura. She looked at Zhao Fu nervously and fearfully because it was possible that Zhao Fu would kill her and her son. Zhao Fu gave a trace of a smile as he said, "Do you want to live or die?" Hearing this, the woman inwardly let out a sigh of relief and understood that she had a chance to live. Even though her husband had been killed by this person, protecting her and her son's lives was the most important thing right now. She nodded and replied, "Sir, please spare us mother and son." Zhao Fu lightly laughed and said, "Do you think I'll spare you?" The woman's expression fell, and she felt quite confused. Hadn't Zhao Fu asked her if she wanted to live or die? Zhao Fu threw the golden godhood to the woman and said, "You will be the metallic god from now on. If you want to live, be obedient and listen to me." Zhao Fu had only absorbed a portion of the legacy power from the metallic godhood, and it contained immense divine power. If anyone absorbed and refined it, they would be able to create a new metallic god. Zhao Fu found that the woman and the young man both had the same metallic god's power within their bodies. If he gave the godhood to one of them, they would be able to refine it more quickly and have a higher fusion rate. The young man felt that it was not suitable, so Zhao Fu chose the woman to be the next metallic god. The woman received the godhood in delight. She now understood Zhao Fu's goal and thanked Zhao Fu. Zhao Fu lightly laughed and did not say anything else as he turned into a ray of light and shot over the horizon. Boom! In the air above a palace made of silver, a massive aura once again descended, and a massive might covered the entire region. Chapter 1864. Who are you? The Silverstone Goddess asked seriously as she looked at Zhao Fu. She knew that Zhao Fu was incredibly terrifying, and he gave off a bloody stench as if he had just killed someone. Zhao Fu gave a trace of a smile as he replied, "I'm here to subdue you." The Silverstone Goddess coldly harumphed. "You want to subdue me? Show me what you've got." Zhao Fu smiled and exploded out with a powerful aura as he rushed in front of the Silverstone Goddess and slashed towards her with terrifying sword energy. The Silverstone Goddess was given a big fright and hurriedly used her spear to block. Bang! The Silverstone Goddess was slashed to the ground, creating a 10-meter wide crater. Rubble flew everywhere and dust filled the air. Lord God! The soldiers in the surroundings were given a big fright and exploded out with auras, preparing to attack Zhao Fu. Zhao Fu disdainfully laughed and prepared to start another massacre. "All of you back down." Within the crater, the Silverstone Goddess stood up, a trace of blood at her lips. If her soldiers charged over, they would only be committing suicide and would not be able to harm Zhao Fu at all. The difference in strength was simply too great. Zhao Fu looked at the Silverstone Goddess. "Ark!" The Silverstone Goddess raised her spear and cried out, exploding out with all of her power. Countless silver arcs of lightning flashed out, covering the surrounding 10 or so meters. A massive wave of power entered the spear, causing it to give off a faint silver light. Arcs of lightning wrapped around it, giving off an aura of destruction and causing the soldiers in the surroundings to feel terror. The Silverstone Goddess held her spear and vigorously threw it toward Zhao Fu. Boom! The spear gave off terrifying power as it shot out like a massive silver bolt of lightning, giving off an unstoppable aura as it quickly flew toward Zhao Fu. Zhao Fu raised a sword and a massive wave of power entered it, causing it to give off boundless black sword light and give off a terrifying aura. Shing! Just as the spear reached Zhao Fu vigorously slashed down with his sword, sending the spear flying and causing countless sparks to fly out. Bang! The spear, which had been sent flying, flew hundreds of meters and stabbed into the ground, causing the ground to crack. Zhao Fu held the Emperor-killing sword and gave off a powerful aura as he rushed at the Silverstone Goddess. The Silverstone Goddess' expression was quite unsightly as she sighed and said, "Wait, I'm willing to submit to you." Zhao Fu stopped and flew in front of the Silverstone Goddess and sent a wave of 6 desires demonic chi into her body. The Silverstone Goddess' face became red, but Zhao Fu quickly sealed that area. Next, a suction force burst out from Zhao Fu's hand to forcibly suck out the legacy power within the Silverstone Goddess body. The Silverstone Goddess did not resist. She knew that Zhao Fu only wanted to absorb some of her power. He had no intention of killing her. However, she did not understand why Zhao Fu wanted to absorb her inherited divine power. An enormous silver light burst out of Zhao Fu's body, successfully absorbing the power of the Silverstone Goddess inheritance. The Silverstone Goddess' face became somewhat pale. Zhao Fu looked at her and said, "Soon, the Jade God and Iron God's people will come to take over your territory. Don't resist, they are also mine." The Silverstone Goddess felt quite shocked and found that the other godly spirits had long since submitted to this person. Was this person's goal to unify this region? Now, the Silverstone Goddess felt a bit better. Since the other godly spirits had already submitted to him, there was no need for her to care about this. Submitting to a person was a very shameful thing. Zhao Fu turned into a ray of light and disappeared over the horizon, heading towards the final godly spirit faction. Boom! A terrifying aura exploded out from a bronze god palace, and a ferocious aura swept out like a wild gale. Sensing this terrifying aura, the residents in the city ran to the side in terror or hid in their houses. Other soldiers gave off powerful auras as they quickly rushed over. A tall and slim woman wearing a green palace dress and giving off a powerful godly spirit aura walked out of the god palace. Zhao Fu stood in the air and gave a trace of a domineering smile as he said, "In this place, the Jade God, Iron God, Metal God, and Silver God have all submitted to me. You're the only one left, so hurry up and submit to me." The Bronze God said in disbelief, "Is that so? What proof do you have? Those 4 factions are all more powerful than me. If you show me proof, I'll immediately submit to you." Even though she could send people to investigate and find out that the 4 factions had already submitted, Zhao Fu did not want to go through so much trouble. Boom! A massive aura exploded out from Zhao Fu's body, and colorful lights shined out from his body. They were gold, silver, green, and black, representing the godly spirit's legacy power. The Bronze God looked at Zhao Fu in shock. How could a single person have so much legacy power? Moreover, the auras that the legacy power gave off were the auras of the other 4 godly spirits. It seemed that the 4 of them had truly submitted to the person in front of him. The Bronze God thought about it. Since the 4 of them had submitted to Zhao Fu, she had to resist as well. After all, she was the weakest of the factions, and if the other 4 could not stop Zhao Fu, she would be even more powerless. As such, it was better to surrender and suffer less. Zhao Fu stood in the air and said, "Can you believe me now?" The Bronze God gave a trace of smile and nodded to express that she was willing to submit. Zhao Fu gave a trace of a smile and flew down from the sky. He used restrictions to lock down the Bronze God and absorb the Bronze Goddess legacy power. The Bronze God felt quite shocked. She had never thought that Zhao Fu could absorb godly spirit legacy power. After Zhao Fu finished absorbing the legacy power, he brought the Bronze God back to the Pantheon Palace. A few days later, the woman had refined the metallic stone godhood and become the new metallic stone god. Zhao Fu came to the Pantheon Palace's platform and stretched out a hand. A 5-colored wave of power flowed out and continuously entered the stone spear, and the stone spear continuously absorbed the legacy power. A while later, the stone spear continuously absorbed the legacy power but was not full yet. Zhao Fu looked at the 5 women beside him and had them also send their legacy power into the spear. Boom! A massive aura exploded out from the stone spear, giving off 5 different lights and a powerful godly spirit aura. The stone spear continuously absorbed everyone's legacy power, and the light it gave off became brighter and brighter. It then turned into a 5-colored pillar of light and shot into the sky, and the surrounding heaven and earth power continuously flowed into it. The stone spear started to turn metallic, and the stone color gradually faded and became a white gold color. The power it gave off became more and more terrifying. Chapter 1865. Looking at the 10,000 God spear on the stage, which gave off powerful ripples and a brilliant 5-colored light, Zhao Fu smiled and went up to hold the spear, and a powerful wave of legacy power flowed into his body. It could be said that even an ordinary person with this 10,000 God spear would become a monstrous expert. In the future, the more godly spirit legacies he absorbed, the more terrifying his power would become, and it might even become a supreme godly weapon. Right now, its power was only a small part of its power, and its true power had not been unleashed yet. By now, 5 or 6 days later, the Pantheon Palace's preliminary construction was complete. The walls and roof were made of pure white marble, and there were exquisite carvings on the walls. There were 9 domineering dragons carved on the ceiling, and the ground was made of black jade. Right now, the Pantheon Palace was only 1,000 meters wide, and it would definitely be expanded in the future. Right now, it was only in its initial stages, so it was quite spacious inside. There was only a stone platform that was 10 meters wide and 2 meters tall, and there were 5 statues around it. Each statue was made of a different material and color. They were all 10 meters tall. The first statue was carved from jade and was green in color. The second statue was carved from iron and was black in color. The third statue was carved from gold and was gold in color. The fourth statue was carved from silver and was silver in color. The fifth statue was carved from bronze and was green in color. These 5 statues were the first statues of the 5 goddesses, and they contained powerful divine power as well as the might of a deity. By now, Zhao Fu held the white gold spear and looked at the 5 goddesses next to him. The 5 goddesses also understood. They half-knelt on the ground and bowed their heads in front of their statues. Zhao Fu gripped the 10,000 god spear with both hands and sent a massive wave of power into it. The 10,000 god spear gave off 5 types of god light, and Zhao Fu held the spear with both hands as he vigorously stabbed it into the ground. Boom! The 10,000 god spear stabbed into the ground, and a wave of 5-colored god power exploded out, rippling out like waves of light. Zhao Fu's expression was serious as he said, "Establish the Pantheon Palace." Boom! The 10,000 god spear gave off an intense 5-colored light that turned into a pillar of light and gave off a powerful aura as it rushed into the sky. The entire sky trembled as light spread out and the sky became 5-colored. Zhao Fu also let go of the myriad god spear and retreated to the side. Heaven and earth fate was madly gathering here, and even ordinary people could sense it. It was like a gust of wind blowing in that direction, and they couldn't help but reveal shocked expressions as they looked towards the horizon. The godly spirits in the surroundings also looked seriously into the distance because they could sense how terrifying that power was. At the same time, they felt quite confused as to why that place was giving off such terrifying ripples. A massive amount of fate was injected into the 5-colored light pillar, causing the 5-colored light pillar to emit an even more shocking amount of power. The 10,000 god spear was also continuously absorbing that massive amount of fate, as though it was going through a metamorphosis. After 10 or so minutes, the 10,000 god spear once again gave off a shocking wave of power. The 5-colored pillar of light became even larger and more terrifying. The fluctuations it emitted were also getting stronger and stronger. Boom! An explosion sounded out as the 10,000 god spear sent a massive wave of power into the sky, causing the 5-colored sky to give off a 5-colored light that gently sprinkled down on the ground. The residents within felt their illnesses disappear and their bodies become more energetic, as if they had become younger. That power caused them to feel a sense of devotion from their souls, and their bodies uncontrollably knelt on the ground. Their heads were pressed against the ground as they smiled peacefully. Countless soldiers felt a wave of power flow into their bodies, causing them to go through changes. At the same time, a wave of power caused their souls to give off a sense of devotion, and their bodies also knelt on the ground. After a while, the multicolored light slowly disappeared, and the multicolored sky also dissipated. The multicolored pillar of light also weakened, and everything returned to normal. System announcement. Pantheon Palace has been established. At that moment, a system announcement sounded out in the countless people's minds. They all felt quite confused and did not understand what was going on. They had been residents and soldiers of the 5 factions, so they did not understand. Now that the 5 factions had disappeared, they had reformed to form the Pantheon Palace. They did not know, but soon people would spread the news. Now that they were residents and soldiers of the Pantheon Palace, everyone would celebrate the establishment of the Pantheon Palace. The platinum-colored spear that gave off a noble, holy, and powerful aura not only contained terrifying power, but also a great amount of fate. Zhao Fu had just used it to establish the Pantheon Palace, and it was now a legacy item of the Pantheon Palace. With this platinum-colored spear, he would be able to establish a Pantheon Palace, and Zhao Fu's Pantheon Palace would be a success. Standing by the side, Zhao Fu sensed the 10,000 God Spear's power and smiled. He went up with one hand and lightly pulled out the 10,000 God Spear. The 10,000 God Spear was now a legacy item of the Pantheon Palace, and as its owner and the founder of the Pantheon Palace, Zhao Fu was now the ruler of all gods and had the power to control all gods. The 10,000 God Spear contained Zhao Fu's source energy, and apart from Zhao Fu, no one else could use it. Unless they had Zhao Fu's bloodline or were the legatees of the Pantheon Palace, no one else could use it. Holding the 10,000 God Spear, Zhao Fu looked at the 5 goddesses kneeling around him and slightly tapped the spear forward. A massive wave of power shot out from the 10,000 God Spear, turning into 5 rays of power that shot into the 5 goddesses' foreheads. The 5 goddesses' bodies trembled as they sensed how powerful this wave of power was. It continuously caused them to go through changes, and their auras became more powerful, and they gave off the power of 10,000 gods. A mark appeared on their foreheads, giving off a faint platinum-colored light. This mark was circular, and there was a picture of a spear at the center, and it looked just like the 10,000 God Spear. This would be the 10,000 God mark from now on. Rise! You are now the 5 palace lords of the Pantheon Palace. I've given you all the power of 10,000 gods and the authority to manage the Pantheon Palace, Zhao Fu said as he smiled at the 5 goddesses. Sensing the power coming from their bodies and hearing Zhao Fu's words, the 5 goddesses grinned and said in unison, "Thank you, God Lord, for your rewards." Now, Zhao Fu was the owner of the Pantheon Palace, so he was called the God Lord. The 5 goddesses got up from the ground and smiled as they looked at Zhao Fu, and the goddess of iron and stone asked, "Lord God, what are you waiting for?" The goddess of iron and stone asked, "God Lord, now that the Pantheon Palace has been established, what should we do next?" Chapter 1866. The 5 goddesses nodded in understanding. Zhao Fu sent them away to deal with the matter that he had just ordered. The 5 goddesses turned around and were about to leave. Zhao Fu called out to the Goldstone Goddess. The Steelstone Goddess was taken aback, but she decided to stay behind. The other 4 goddesses, on the other hand, were slightly concerned. They did not know why Zhao Fu had asked the Steelstone Goddess to stay behind. Although the 4 of them did not want to admit it, Zhao Fu was the master of Pantheon, so they cared about Zhao Fu very much. They also wanted to gain Zhao Fu's favor and gain more power. The future of the Pantheon Temple was bright. It would definitely become an extremely terrifying force in the future, and they would also become supreme rulers. They were very confident about this. After all, with the Pantheon Palace's legacy attribute, the more godly spirits they added, the more terrifying their power would be, and their growth rate would be beyond anyone's imagination. At the same time, they were quite curious as to who Zhao Fu was and why he had such terrifying power. Moreover, his divine deity was so special that he could absorb the legacies of different gods. Without his ability, it would have been impossible for him to establish the Pantheon Palace. Although the other 4 goddesses were somewhat concerned, they did not ask much and left the Pantheon to deal with those matters. The Steelstone Goddess understood that she was different from the other 4 goddesses. She had become a godly spirit after absorbing her husband's divinity, and her husband had been killed by Zhao Fu. Currently, Zhao Fu had left a restriction on her body, making it so that she didn't dare to resist Zhao Fu. Now, the Goldstone Goddess understood that Zhao Fu did not feel at ease with her. Now that she had become one of the 5 palace masters, not only would she become incredibly powerful in the future, but she would also wield immense authority. The metallic stone goddess knelt on the ground and said seriously, "God Lord, I will definitely be loyal to the Pantheon Temple and will never betray it. My son will not seek revenge and is willing to submit to the God Lord." Zhao Fu chuckled. "You're quite understanding." The metallic goddess gave a trace of a smile as she looked at Zhao Fu and said, "Since Godly Lord has treated me so well, I should be loyal to Godly Lord. If Godly Lord is willing, I can serve Godly Lord right now." At that moment, the Steelstone Goddess felt quite complicated. Her relationship with her husband was quite good, and her husband's death made her feel quite bad. However, Zhao Fu, the person who killed her man, did not kill her and torture her. She was already very glad, but she did not expect that Zhao Fu not only made her a god of a new generation, but also gave her even more power and authority. Zhao Fu treated her so well, and she could not bring herself to hate him. At the same time, her body was affected by the six desires' demonic qi, and she wanted to receive Zhao Fu's favor. Zhao Fu smiled as he came before her and lifted her chin. The Goldstone goddess looked quite flirtatious as she looked at Zhao Fu in anticipation. Zhao Fu smiled and said, "Since you understand, I don't need to say anything more. You can go and deal with your matters first. Nowadays, there will be a lot of merging of forces, especially your force." The Goldstone goddess looked quite disappointed and lightly nodded before standing up and leaving. Zhao Fu stabbed the 10,000 god spear back into the stage, and the 5 statues around him gave off faint divine light. The divine light condensed on the stage and continuously nurtured the 10,000 god spear. In the future, the more statues there were, the more powerful the 10,000 god spear would be. After establishing the Pantheon Palace, there were indeed many things that needed to be taken care of. Moreover, what a new faction needed the most was cohesiveness and a sense of identity. Without those things, it was possible for the faction to collapse. Zhao Fu went to the Jade God Palace and did not have anywhere else to go. The Pantheon Palace was currently being constructed, and it would be where Zhao Fu would be located. It would be the center of the Pantheon Palace's power. A day later, the 5 goddesses had spread the news to all of the factions. Now, the 5 factions had merged into the Pantheon Palace, and all of the factions' names had disappeared. Only the Pantheon Palace remained. Now, everyone understood that the power that caused their souls to give off a devout feeling was the Pantheon Palace's power. The Pantheon Palace had increased the commoners' cohesiveness. After hearing about this, the commoners did not have any objections, as this was not something they could decide. Their original faction leaders had become members of the Pantheon Palace, and their status had not changed much. They also knew that a god lord had appeared and that he was the true owner of the Pantheon Palace, and all of the godly spirits had to listen to him. Zhao Fu gave the order to further strengthen the unity of the factions in order to celebrate the Pantheon Palace. On that day, the Pantheon Palace became quite lively. There were ribbons and lanterns on the streets, and there were paintings on the walls. There was laughter everywhere, and it was a festive atmosphere. After the celebration, Zhao Fu would come to take care of matters. The first thing was the Pantheon Palace's current strength. The Pantheon Palace was formed from the original 5 godly spirit factions, and it was not very powerful. They controlled a total of 20 regions, more than 180 cities, a population of about 60 million, and about 4 million soldiers. Even though their combined strength could rival a small kingdom's, in Zhao Fu's eyes, they were still quite weak. With this sort of strength, it would take a lot of time to develop and grow. The most important thing was the soldiers' strength. Zhao Fu needed them to conquer the world. Zhao Fu gathered 1,000 soldiers in front of him. The soldiers understood that Zhao Fu was the owner of the Pantheon Palace, the person with the most authority in the entire faction. Even godly spirits had to listen to him, so they were incredibly respectful to Zhao Fu. Zhao Fu's gaze fell on their bodies and sensed their power. The commoners living in the godly spirit world were all part of the god race, and they were affected by all sorts of godly spirits, such as demon gods, devil gods, light gods, darkness gods, ocean gods, mountain gods, and so on. They were split into different god races, and the god race's innate attributes were strengthened by divine power, making their stats slightly better than the human race. The soldiers here were also called godly spirit soldiers, and they contained divine power within their bodies. There were many types of divine power, some strong and some weak, and this was related to the godly spirit they belonged to. If the godly spirit was more powerful, the divine power they would give their soldiers would be more powerful, and the soldiers would rely on this advantage to defeat other soldiers. Of course, godly spirit soldiers also needed to cultivate. Godly spirits only gave them a type of high-grade power and did not give them divine power to raise their cultivation by many stages. Now, the soldiers in front of Zhao Fu had been affected by the 10,000 God spear and had 10,000 God power. Even though it was only the weak 10,000 God power from the 5 godly spirit legacies, it was already quite extraordinary. Chapter 1867. Apart from this, they also had 10,000 godly power, which gave them resistance to other types of divine power. Those divine powers would be less effective against 10,000 godly power, which was a big advantage. To a certain extent, they would weaken the enemy's strength. 10,000 godly powers effects were not just this. It also had a terrifying ability, which was to devour other types of divine power, which was quite terrifying. If it could devour divine power, if one fought with it, all of its divine power would be devoured, and the one who would lose in the end would definitely be one. Unless one had great power that could suppress the other party. Facing an enemy that could devour power, it was highly likely that one would lose. Moreover, this devouring power did not only devour a single type of godly spirit, but could devour all godly spirits and suppress all godly spirit armies. Right now, 10,000 godly powers own power, as well as 10,000 godly powers immunity to all types of divine power, as well as 10,000 godly powers devouring power. These 3 powers added together would make a godly spirit a terrifying opponent. However, because Pantheon only had 5 godly spirits and they were not very strong, these 3 powers were still quite weak. However, if Pantheon's godly spirits increased, these 3 powers would become even stronger. When that time came, not only would they have terrifying 10,000 godly power, but they would also be immune to all types of divine power, making it so that no matter how one attacked them, the effects would be very weak. The most terrifying devouring power would be able to instantly suck a person dry. This sort of army would definitely be able to conquer the world and sweep through everything, becoming the most terrifying army in the godly spirit world. Sensing their power, a smile appeared on Zhao Fu's face, and his heart was filled with delight. It was a pity that Pantheon had only just been constructed and there were only 4 million godly spirit soldiers. 10,000 godly power was still quite weak, and with its current strength, any slightly larger faction would be able to destroy Pantheon. Right now, Pantheon still needed some time to grow before it could become a powerful faction. Zhao Fu then ordered 1,000 Pantheon soldiers to use another terrifying ability. After looking at the soldiers' stats, Zhao Fu naturally had a purpose for summoning 1,000 soldiers, which was to use that terrifying ability. As Pantheon soldiers, not only did they have many restraints and resistances against ordinary godly spirit soldiers, but they also had abilities that specifically dealt with godly spirits. This was also one of the abilities of the 10,000 God Spear. The 10,000 God Spear was a legacy item of the Pantheon Palace, so it was in existence above the 10,000 gods. Naturally, it had to have the ability to deal with all sorts of gods. Only then could it shock the 10,000 gods and make them submit to the 10,000 God Spear, not daring to resist at all. This ability had to be terrifying to the extreme, or else it would not be able to shock the myriad of deities. That ability was the God-slaying ability, which specialized in killing all sorts of deities. I don't care if you are the god of the sun, the god of demons, the god of stars, the god of plants, the god of rivers, the god of flowers, the god of evil spirits, the god of beasts, the god of evil spirits, the god of ghosts and monsters. Anyone who dares to defy the gods will be killed without mercy. The All-God Spear's power had been inherited from Zhao Fu's godhood, and it specialized in suppressing all kinds of gods. It was a power that specialized in killing gods. Now that they were part of the Pantheon Palace's army, they naturally had to have this power to help the Pantheon suppress all sorts of traitorous and evil gods. Zhao Fu gave the order, and the 1,000 soldiers obeyed and exploded out with a silver-white aura. This aura gathered together, causing platinum-colored motes to appear in the surroundings and fuse together to form a platinum-colored spear. It was 10 or so meters long and gave off an intense wave of god-slaying power, causing people's bodies to feel a chill. It looked just like the all-god spear. Zhao Fu gave a trace of a smile and said to the jade goddess next to him, "Go and try this god-slaying spear." The jade goddess nodded seriously and did not look down on it. The god-slaying spear gave off an intense wave of god-slaying power, making her feel a trace of danger. The jade goddess came before the soldiers and stretched out a hand, causing a wave of godly spirit to flow out and form a jade shield. Under Zhao Fu's orders, the soldiers controlled the god-slaying spear and aimed it at the jade goddess. Boom! The 10 or so meter long silver-white god-slaying spear gave off terrifying power as it shot out, leaving behind a silver-white ray of light. It gave off a massive aura and seemed to give off a fatal sense of danger. The jade goddess' expression slightly fell. Facing the incoming god-slaying spear, all of her hair stood on end and her body felt a chill. Bang! The spear gave off terrifying god-slaying power as it slammed against the jade shield. A terrifying wave of power slammed against the jade shield, causing a few cracks to appear on it. The spear gave off a bright platinum-colored light and gave off immense power as it continued to slam against the jade shield, giving off powerful ripples. Crack! Crack! Clear sounds rang out as more and more cracks appeared on the jade shield. The jade goddess' eyes narrowed and sent even more power into the jade shield, causing it to stop cracking. The platinum-colored spear lost all of its power and turned into motes of light as it dissipated. The jade goddess' expression was quite serious. Even though it looked like she had easily blocked the god-slaying spear, it was a god-slaying spear formed by 1,000 soldiers. However, this did not mean that the god-slaying spear was weak. She could sense how terrifying the god-slaying spear was. It was specially prepared for god-slaying, and it greatly countered godly spirit power. If hundreds of thousands of soldiers formed a god-slaying spear, if a godly spirit was not careful, it could be insta-killed by the god-slaying spear. This was the god-slaying spear's true power, and the jade goddess looked at Zhao Fu seriously. No matter what, these were soldiers, and yet they were so lethal to her. That person's soldiers were simply god-slaying soldiers, and that person was simply too dangerous. Zhao Fu sensed the jade goddess' gaze and turned to look at her. The jade goddess immediately gave a trace of a smile, and she no longer looked as serious as before. She felt even more wariness towards Zhao Fu. However, she understood that as long as she obeyed Zhao Fu and did not resist, nothing would happen to her. She was one of the most powerful people in the Pantheon Temple, and she would not have to worry about these soldiers attacking her. Zhao Fu gave a trace of a smile as he asked, "How powerful is the god-slaying spear?" The jade goddess smiled as she replied, "It's very powerful. It's very lethal to godly spirits, and if I gather more soldiers, I won't be able to stop them." Zhao Fu gave a pleased smile and had the 1,000 soldiers retreat before gathering the 5 women and 4 million godly spirit soldiers. Now, that Zhao Fu was the leader of the Pantheon Temple, he naturally had to meet with his soldiers and take control of all of the soldiers. Chapter 1868. Following this, Zhao Fu gathered the various generals and appointed some capable generals to train the soldiers so that the war could start as soon as possible. This was to expand the Pantheon Temple's territory and plunder more resources and people. Zhao Fu also planned to train these soldiers to be like Qin's soldiers. They would not be merciful to their enemies, and they would not even have any feelings towards their enemies. They would absolutely obey orders and fight and kill. Wherever Zhao Fu's sword pointed, they had to fearlessly advance, courageously, and sweep through everything before them. Whether it was men, women, the elderly, or children, they would not spare anyone they wanted to kill. Even livestock would not be spared. Even when facing high and mighty kings and godly spirits, they would raise their butcher's knives. This required Zhao Fu to start training them. In Qin, Zhao Fu had Bai Qi, who would train the soldiers to be like what Zhao Fu wanted. Moreover, the soldiers of Qin soldiers had experienced countless battles. Back then, Qin village had only been a small village, and it had only become the current Qin Empire through battles. Now, these godly spirit soldiers lacked fighting and killing, and the generals would not train the soldiers to be like what Zhao Fu wanted. As such, they needed Zhao Fu to train them first. On a very large open space, the godly spirit soldiers gathered here and lined up orderly in square formations. Zhao Fu stood on a platform, and behind him stood the selected generals. The first thing Zhao Fu did was to get them used to blood and gore. There was a wild beast in front of the soldiers. There was a wild boar, a cow, a deer, and a horse. Use the weapons in your hands as quickly as possible and turn the animals in front of you into minced meat. Zhao Fu stood on the platform and looked at the soldiers in front of him as he spoke coldly. The soldiers looked at the animals in front of them and did not hesitate at all. If they did not dare to kill these animals, they would not be soldiers. However, Zhao Fu's orders to turn the animals in front of them into minced meat was something that they had never done before. Roar! Roar! Screams rang out as the soldiers raised their blades, swords, axes, spears, and lances to attack the beasts in front of them. Some swung their swords at the wild beasts, causing wounds to appear on the bodies of the beasts, causing blood to continuously splatter. Some stabbed the beasts with their weapons, causing blood to spurt out, causing the beasts to continuously scream. The screams were filled with pain, despair, and pain. Killing a wild beast was different from slaughtering a group of wild beasts. The screams resounded in all directions, and the pungent smell of blood caused people to feel a chill down their spines. Usually they would kill wild beasts at most, but not like this. The wild beasts were all dead, and the ground was quickly dyed red with blood. The corpses were broken into a pile, and the flesh and organs were indistinguishable. The bloody scene stung the eyes of the soldiers. Some of the soldiers couldn't stand the bloody scene and revealed expressions of nausea. Some even vomited. Zhao Fu stood in front and watched. The general stood behind Zhao Fu and understood what Zhao Fu meant. He wanted to stimulate the bloody scene and make the soldiers numb to it. They would not hesitate to kill and would obey all orders. Using this method to nurture soldiers was to treat them as killing machines. It seemed that the other side was not a good person. Even though they thought this, Zhao Fu was the master of the Pantheon Palace, so they naturally did not dare to say anything. These soldiers were now Zhao Fu's soldiers, and he could do whatever he wanted. At that moment, Zhao Fu spoke. His voice was not very loud, but everyone could hear him. Drag out the people who vomited and give them 10 whips. Everyone present felt quite surprised. They had never thought that Zhao Fu would suddenly give such an order. However, they still obeyed and dragged out the people who vomited. The people who vomited looked incredibly regretful and afraid. If they had known this would happen, they would have endured it. Now they begged Zhao Fu to give them a chance, but Zhao Fu ignored them. The whips of the soldiers landed on the bodies of the soldiers, causing their skin and flesh to turn into mush, causing blood to flow out. Some of the soldiers could not take it anymore and screamed. Following this, Zhao Fu had all of the soldiers return to their square formations. After this, the soldiers started to feel quite nervous and felt a trace of fear toward Zhao Fu. They now knew what kind of person Zhao Fu was. Zhao Fu stood where he was and did not say anything. The soldiers continued to stand among the corpses and pools of blood, taking in the bloody stench. Some of them could not help but vomit again. Zhao Fu said coldly, "Drag these people out and give them 20 whips." The soldiers at the side quickly dragged those people out and lashed them with whips, causing those people to scream miserably. Not only was the atmosphere incredibly tense, but it was also quite oppressive, and no one dared to make any noise. The generals behind Zhao Fu started to feel quite nervous and fearful of Zhao Fu. After a few hours, Zhao Fu once again gave the order to bring over 100,000 people. There were men and women, old and young, and their bodies were all tied up in a row. They were all people who would not submit to the Pantheon Palace, and most of them were from the metallic stone god, because Zhao Fu had killed the original metallic stone god. Now, in front of the soldiers, they looked terrified and had a bad feeling. Some cried and begged for mercy, some cursed furiously, and some stood their ground, giving off an air of arrogance. Now all of you go up and stab your weapons into their bodies." Zhao Fu's voice once again sounded out. The soldiers looked at each other and at the people whose hands were tied up. They could not resist at all and could only slaughter them. There were elderly people who were 60 or 70 years old and had white hair, and there were also 5 or 6-year-old children who looked quite childish. Some of the soldiers could not bear to attack these people and could not bear to do so. Most of the godly spirits they followed were not evil gods, so they had never done such a thing before. Moreover, ordinary godly spirits were not willing to do such things either, as such massacres would affect the hearts of the people and cause faith power to be lost. Zhao Fu frowned and said coldly, "This is an order." Hearing this, some of the soldiers obeyed and coldly held their swords as they walked up to those people and stabbed their swords into their bodies. Blood flew everywhere as those people looked at the soldiers who had killed them with hatred and resentment, and some of them cursed out. Seeing people go up, the other soldiers also went up and stabbed their weapons into those people's bodies. Chapter 1869. Some soldiers even shouted angrily, "I believe in the good God. Our God would never give such a cruel and inhumane order. I will not obey this order." That's right. Killing those tied-up men and women is one thing, but killing the elderly and children is something I can't accept. I can't do such a thing. The Pantheon God's Lord should be a benevolent person. Only then will he be recognized by more people and be loved by more people. After a long time, these people will submit to the Pantheon God. This is too cruel. Look at that little girl. She doesn't know anything and looks terrified. If he could do such a thing, he wouldn't be a human. You want me to do this? I want to quit the army. My purpose in joining the army was to protect my family, not to kill innocent people. Me too. I was loyal to our God, and now that our God has become a member of the Pantheon God, I don't want to be a soldier anymore. I want to go home and farm. Hearing these people's voices, Zhao Fu had expected this. After all, this faction was not one that Zhao Fu had single-handedly established. It was a faction that had been formed by 5 factions. In fact, not many people knew about his existence, and they had only submitted to the original God. Among these people, there would definitely be some who opposed him and would not obey him. In Qin, Zhao Fu was the ruler of everything. As long as Zhao Fu gave an order, it would resolutely carry it out without any objections or hesitation. After all, it had been personally established by Zhao Fu. Even though Zhao Fu did not care about the Yellow Springs Kingdom in the underworld, it had been established by Zhao Fu, and it had developed from a small faction into the Yellow Springs Kingdom. Even though it was the underworld kingdom, Qin's influence was very deep. They looked up to and respected Zhao Fu's existence and would not have any objections to Zhao Fu's orders. Hearing these objections, Zhao Fu's expression was quite calm as he slowly said, "Those of you who don't want to come out can come out." Hearing that Zhao Fu did not seem to be angry, those people heaved a sigh of relief. If they raise an objection like this, they might be severely punished by Zhao Fu because Zhao Fu was the master of the Pantheon. At this time, some people who didn't want to kill the innocent and do such a cruel thing walked out from the square formation. When the others saw someone walk out, they followed suit. Some of them understood that the Pantheon God Lord was too savage, and if they joined the army, they wouldn't have a good ending. As such, they didn't want to join the army. In any case, if other gods attacked, they could just surrender. The other gods needed faith and wouldn't kill them. In the end, about 100,000 people walked out from the huge phalanx and gathered together, planning to take off their uniforms and go home. Zhao Fu turned to look at the group of generals behind him and said calmly, "Do you have any objections to me?" Most of these generals were talented people who had been promoted by Zhao Fu, and with the positions that Zhao Fu had given them, as well as the fact that they were now his soldiers, they had no reason to object. However, some of them were not used to Zhao Fu's way of doing things. Now that he was so cruel, who knew what the Pantheon God Lord would become in the future? This was different from what they believed in. Even though they might be stripped of their positions by Zhao Fu, they still stood out. "God Lord, we can't accept this and won't do such an inhumane thing." Even though some of them are rebels, Their families are innocent. Please spare them. If you're not willing, we can't serve you. What we believe in is the complete opposite, and we're willing to resign from our positions. Zhao Fu did not say anything and took out the Emperor Killing Sword. He sent all of his power into the Emperor Killing Sword, and an intense sword chi exploded out, forming a ferocious sword chi storm that gave off a sharp aura. Sensing this power, everyone's bodies could not help but tremble and feel terror. Before they could react, Zhao Fu slashed out. Boom! An enormous sword light containing destructive power and a ferocious sword wind quickly slashed towards the 100,000 soldiers. Chi! Chi! Chi before the soldiers could react. Their bodies were cut into pieces by the massive sword light. Blood flew everywhere and their corpses flew everywhere. Seeing this scene, the soldiers who were further away looked terrified and turned to run. However, they were also cut apart by the sword light in the next moment. That terrifying sword light flashed past, and not a single person jumped away. Blood and flesh flew into the sky before falling to the ground, creating a rain of blood. The ground was dyed red, and an extremely dense stench of blood spread out. Zhao Fu's gaze then turned to the generals who had just stepped out. They had never thought that Zhao Fu would be so cold-blooded and savage as to kill 100,000 soldiers. Zhao Fu's eyes lit up as he looked at Zhao Fu. At that moment, Zhao Fu's pupils dilated and a massive sword chi slashed out, cutting those generals into pieces. Blood sprayed everywhere, covering the other generals. Immediately, whether it was the soldiers below or the generals on the stage, their bodies froze and they looked terrified, not daring to move at all. The scene fell into a deathly silence, and no one dared to make sound. No one had thought that Zhao Fu would directly kill 100,000 people and a few generals. Those people had all been soldiers of the Pantheon Palace, and those generals had been personally promoted by Zhao Fu. Now, Zhao Fu did not say anything and did not give those people a chance to speak. He had directly killed them all. Facing such a person, no one would not feel fear. It was as if they had fallen into darkness, and Zhao Fu was the source of that darkness. Does anyone else have any objections? That extremely cold voice sounded out in countless people's ears, making them feel as if they were being stabbed by ice. Not a single person present dared to make a sound, and the scene was still deathly silent. Zhao Fu was currently quite angry. There had never been so many people who dared to object to him. Even though they were from the Pantheon Palace, those who disobeyed his orders had to die. This was not establishing a free and just kingdom, but an empire. As the ruler of an empire, Zhao Fu was the ruler of everything, and he had to obey his orders. If he did not do this, he would not be the ruler of an empire. Chapter 1870. No matter whose followers you were before, no matter where you came from, you must now understand that I am your master, and you must submit to me. I didn't want to do this, but since you dare to disobey my orders, don't blame me for what I'll do. Zhao Fu's furious voice sounded out, and everyone still did not dare to make a sound, as their hearts were filled with terror. Zhao Fu paused for a moment. Zhao Fu looked at the army in front of him and said coldly, "Now, do you know who you're submitting to and who you're serving? We submit to Sir God Lord. We swear loyalty to Sir God, Lord to the death." The soldiers and the generals behind Zhao Fu all understood and knelt on the ground as they yelled in unison. Their voices were incredibly loud, shaking the surroundings. They gave off a feeling of submitting to supreme power, a domineering aura, and a cold aura of killing and conquering. Their expressions were filled with awe, as if they were revering their godly spirits. After all, the godly spirit world only had godly spirits and did not have any kingdoms, sects, or other factions. These people would normally obey and be loyal to godly spirits, which was why so many people had objected to Zhao Fu's words. This caused Zhao Fu to lose all of his dignity as the leader of a faction. If he did not kill these people, how would Zhao Fu rule the Pantheon Temple in the future? Once he opened his mouth, anyone would be able to stand up against Zhao Fu. What would Zhao Fu do then? He had to use bloody methods to make them change their way of thinking and understand who they should listen to. Otherwise, after the Pantheon Temple became more powerful in the future, it would become a massive hidden danger. After all, these soldiers would not listen to him and would only be loyal to godly spirits. If a godly spirit rebelled, they would also join in and devour Zhao Fu. Zhao Fu could not allow this to happen, which was why Zhao Fu had personally taken control of the army. Seeing the scene of tens of thousands of soldiers submitting to him, Zhao Fu's anger dissipated and the coldness in his expression eased. Zhao Fu then said, "Rise. Since you have submitted to me, I will not treat you unfairly. Now, each of you will be rewarded with 10 military merits." Everyone couldn't help but smile. They hadn't done anything at all, yet they had obtained 10 military merits. 10 military merits required a lot of effort on the battlefield to obtain. "Thank you, Divine Master," the soldiers shouted in unison with joy on their faces. They had also acknowledged Zhao Fu in their hearts. Humans are like this. First make them afraid, then give them some benefits, and they will be more loyal to you. Zhao Fu didn't say anything else. The rest of the soldiers' training could be handed over to the generals. Then they would slowly change and become soldiers like Qin's soldiers fighting for Zhao Fu. He would absolutely obey Zhao Fu's orders and would never disobey again. As for those who had not submitted, Zhao Fu had no interest in caring about them, as he had already achieved his goal. After casually killing some of the more stubborn people, the others saw how terrifying Zhao Fu was and were so scared that their legs became weak. They had long since knelt on the ground and submitted, not daring to say anything. After returning to the Pantheon, Zhao Fu carried out his first major reform. First, he increased the soldiers' privileges and status so that the commoners would be more motivated to join the army. Moreover, Zhao Fu wanted a large number of soldiers. Apart from this, Zhao Fu also needed to strengthen his control over the commoners' thoughts. Just like the soldiers, the commoners would only listen to and serve the gods and support the gods. Towards the commoners, Zhao Fu's methods were much gentler. He didn't kill many people, nor was his methods bloody or cruel. After all, as an outsider, even though Zhao Fu had become the Pantheon's owner and their lord, they wouldn't immediately submit to him. If he killed those who didn't submit, there wouldn't be many commoners left. The first thing that Zhao Fu did was the most important thing, which was to revise the Bible. Every god had a Bible, and every commoner believed in a god and was familiar with the corresponding Bible. The Bible's main purpose was to deepen faith and make the commoners believe in the gods. This would provide more faith power, and the more faith power there was, the stronger the gods would be. Another thing was to spread faith. When a god conquered an area, the commoners didn't know what god it was or what to do. At this time, the Bible would tell the commoners what to do and how to believe in a new god. It would also let them understand what god they were submitting to. Zhao Fu didn't burn all of the Bible. If it was an ordinary ruler, he would definitely burn these books that were detrimental to his rule. He would also list these books as forbidden books and not allow anyone to read them. He would strengthen his control over the commoners and make them submit to the king's power instead of the god's power to prevent any rebels. Zhao Fu had thought about doing this before, but he quickly gave up. This was because the reward was not a kingdom, but the Pantheon, a faction formed by many gods. Gods needed faith, and that was the foundation of their existence. If you didn't give them faith, how could the gods submit to you? The Bible was the most important thing about faith, so it couldn't be burned. Zhao Fu also wanted the gods to be powerful, so he also needed faith power. As such, the Bible couldn't be destroyed. However, the Bible was something that could shake the rule. With the Bible, people would only support the gods, not Zhao Fu, and they wouldn't listen to Zhao Fu. The two sides were in conflict. However, Zhao Fu had a very good solution, which was to revise the Bible and unify the Bible into the Pantheon. The core of the content was that the Pantheon submitted to the Pantheon. The Pantheon was an existence that controlled the gods, and the Pantheon was formed by many gods. No matter what god they believed in, they were all gods of the Pantheon, and believing in gods was also believing in the pantheon. The rest of the content was just to write that the god-saint realms didn't change. This way, the ideology would be unified and would prevent division. No matter what god they believed in, they would all believe in the pantheon, and the pantheon was the existence that ruled everything. As long as the pantheon status was the highest, Zhao Fu's status would also be the highest. Only then would the people support him and protect him, and he would also be in existence above the gods. It was similar to the god of creation, who was in charge of many gods. Even though the people believed in other gods, they were more loyal to the god of creation. This strengthened the control of the gods and could also provide faith power to the gods. It could be said that it was killing two birds with one stone. Otherwise, if he destroyed the Saint Realm, he would encounter all kinds of resistance, first from the gods, then from the people and soldiers. It would be very difficult to implement, unless he used bloody methods. Zhao Fu wasn't willing to do this unless he had no other choice. Chapter 1871. Because the godly spirit world was a godly spirit world, Zhao Fu planned to reform it according to a religion. Just like before, he would recite the 10,000 holy scripture 3 times in the morning, noon, and night, and he would dress neatly. He would not wear brightly colored clothes or clothes that were too revealing, and he would wear dignified black and white clothes during formal occasions. Not only did he have to change the way he dressed, but his buildings also had to be dignified, and he could not build strange or brightly colored buildings. This made the entire faction look dignified, and the people within it would become serious and dignified. There would not be any laughter and would be filled with a sense of holiness. Apart from changing the way he dressed, Zhao Fu also made it so that they could not make too much noise on the streets, talk too loudly, laugh too loudly, or cry too loudly. Not only did he have to change their appearance, but he also had to change their behavior, making the faction look more solemn and dignified. Finally, he had to destroy some books and paintings that did not conform to his rule. They had to be dignified, solemn, tragic, pious, and dedicated. This would change the people's mentality, turning them into dignified, solemn, pious, and pious people who would do anything for the Pantheon Temple. However, Zhao Fu knew that living in such an environment would make life quite boring, and it would be quite depressing. Even though they would provide a large amount of faith power and would not resist Zhao Fu's rule, they would not resist Zhao Fu's rule, and Zhao Fu would become a supreme existence in their hearts. Whenever they saw Zhao Fu, they would madly support Zhao Fu and support Zhao Fu. No matter what Zhao Fu wanted them to do, they would not refuse. However, Zhao Fu was not that kind of ruler, nor did he want to be that kind of ruler. As such, Zhao Fu did not go to the extreme. After all, these people were his people, so Zhao Fu made some changes. There were 7 days in a week, and the first 6 days had to follow the rules. Anyone who broke the rules had to be punished and could not be tolerated. However, on the last day, it was a festival, and they were allowed to wear brightly colored clothes and do as they pleased, so that their lives are not too depressing. Although the solemn effect was somewhat weakened, Zhao Fu still felt that it was worth it. He was definitely not the kind of person who would oppress the people to death. After the new rules were issued, they were quickly implemented. The power of faith had indeed increased a lot, and many people had begun to recognize the ruling position of the Pantheon Temple. They also recognized that Zhao Fu was the supreme existence. The plan was very successful. The army was trained according to Zhao Fu's method, and they already had the cold and murderous aura of Qin's soldiers. The people also provided more power of faith and supported Zhao Fu. In the end, the appearance of the Pantheon will be fixed. You don't have to do anything, and it will be the same. After a few more days, Zhao Fu summoned a few goddesses. Recently, the goddesses had been quite shocked. Their factions and soldiers had become completely different under Zhao Fu's rule. They now gave off a cold, austere, and calm feeling, and their faith energy had greatly increased as well. They were even more curious about what kind of person Zhao Fu was and where he came from. Not only was he terrifyingly powerful, but his ruling ability was also great. He was definitely the leader of a large faction, or else he would not have such power. Zhao Fu had called them over in order to expand the Pantheon Temple. Now that the Pantheon Temple was united and its soldiers had a certain amount of battle power, it was time to start fighting against the other godly spirits. The Pantheon Temple was still so weak, and even a slightly larger faction could destroy it. As such, they had to become more powerful in a short period of time. Zhao Fu would not just stay here, as he still had to find a large number of things with time attributes. This was one of Zhao Fu's most important tasks. As for awakening the god race's Emperor Star, Zhao Fu now had some ideas. He found that every time he fused with a godly spirit's legacy power, not only would the divinity power in his mind become stronger, but would also cause his body to go through godly transformations. This caused Zhao Fu's body to become more godly, and every part of his body was filled with divine power. Moreover, he also had a slight connection to the god race's Emperor Star in the sky. The more he absorbed, the stronger his connection to the god race's Emperor Star. If he could reach a certain level, he would be able to awaken the god race's Emperor Star. Zhao Fu put these things aside for now. The most important thing right now was the Pantheon Temple. Zhao Fu looked at the goddesses and said, "How much do you know about the factions around the Pantheon Temple? What do you think will happen if we start fighting against them?" The goddess of iron and stone thought about it and said, "There are roughly 13 godly spirit factions nearby, and there are old and new godly spirits. They are about as strong as us, and their factions are the same. As for places further away, I heard that there are very powerful godly spirit factions, but I don't know much about them. We normally stay in the temple to absorb faith and rarely travel far, so we don't know. If we start fighting against the nearby godly spirit factions, the other godly spirit factions further away will sense it. Moreover, with the Pantheon Temple's current strength, we cannot face 10 or so godly spirit factions, so we need to carefully devour them one by one." The Jade Goddess nodded and said, "Now that the Pantheon Temple has appeared, they're already on guard. If we aren't careful, they might attack the Pantheon Temple at any time." The Silverstone Goddess said in agreement, "We should discuss how to devour the other factions one by one and minimize the impact of this so that we don't attract too much attention." The Goddess of Iron and Stone and Bronze Goddesses also greatly agreed with this idea. However, Zhao Fu frowned. How long would it take to devour them one by one? He did not have that much time to stay here, and these were all small factions. Even if they devoured them in the end, they would not be very powerful. After thinking for a while, Zhao Fu said, "Write a letter to them now. Either join the Pantheon Temple and become one of its gods, or die." The goddesses were shocked and stared at Su Bai with wide eyes. This was a direct declaration of war against the 13 gods, and it was so overbearing that they could choose death or surrender directly. Was this really possible? The Jade Goddess advised, "God Lord, although none of the 13 of them is weak, if they unite, we can't beat them at all. We still have to be careful about this matter." Zhao Fu said, "Don't worry, I'll solve all these things. Just follow my instructions." Chapter 1872. Within a temple made of wood, an old man with a wizened face and a magic staff sat on the throne. He also had a look of anger on his face. A green-clothed young man next to him said angrily, "This Pantheon God Palace is simply too arrogant. It was formed in such a short time, and its foundation isn't even stable, yet it wants us to submit or die. What arrogance!" A beautiful woman said with an arrogant tone, "Since they want to die, we'll grant them their wish. Just a small faction made up of 5 godly spirits dares to call itself Pantheon Temple? They're simply too arrogant." A middle-aged man said in agreement, "It's the first time I've seen such arrogant and domineering people. It's best to destroy them and see if they still dare to say such words." A fair-skinned young man next to him lightly laughed as he said, "Everyone, don't be angry. Pantheon God Palace is seeking death. Not only did it send such a letter to our faction, but it also sent such a letter to the other factions. 13 factions will be enough to crush it." Hearing this, the green-clothed young man laughed as he said, "My God, Let's act quickly. If we're too slow, the benefits will be taken by others. The elderly man thought for a moment before saying, let's gather our soldiers and destroy Pantheon God Palace. Facing this juicy piece of meat, the elderly man wanted a piece of it. In the godly spirit world, faith was the most precious resource, and all godly spirits were tempted by faith. As such, they would definitely fight over faith. The people in the surroundings obeyed, and they all had confident smiles on their faces. Right now, it was simply too easy for 13 factions to destroy one faction. Who are you? This is the Wood Tree God Palace. Suddenly, a berating voice sounded out from the entrance. The people from the Wood Tree God Palace did not pay much attention to it and thought that someone had accidentally barged in. Arg! Pain cries sounded out, causing everyone's expressions to fall. Someone had charged in, and this person was not weak at all. The cries came from the guards. The elderly man holding the magic staff frowned and said to the green-clothed young man, go take a look and see what's going on. The green-clothed young man nodded seriously and walked out of the Wood Tree God Palace. Arg! A scream rang out, and everyone's expressions changed. They were no longer able to remain calm, because the scream had come from the azure-clothed young man. Everyone quickly went outside and saw that the azure-clothed young man's body had been slashed open, and his blood and organs were splattered all over the ground. There was also a pile of guards' corpses on the ground, and there was a person standing next to them. He wore a black cloak and held a black sword. He gave off a cold aura and looked like a murderous demon, causing people's hairs to stand on end. The old man stared at Zhao Fu and said coldly, who are you? Zhao Fu looked at the elder and gave a trace of a cold smile as he said, I am the Pantheon God Palace's God Lord. You have two choices, kneel before me and submit to me, or die by my sword. A trace of anger appeared on the faces of the people present. This was the first time someone had been so arrogant. He actually wanted the god they believed in to kneel and submit to him. Did he not know that gods were supreme existences? The elder looked furious as he said furiously, you're seeking death. The elder gave off a powerful aura and raised his magic staff. Boundless green light shined out as dozens of 3-meter-long wooden spikes appeared, giving off powerful auras. The elder waved his magic staff. Swish, swish, swish. The wooden spikes gave off immense power as they quickly shot towards Zhao Fu, seeming to want to pierce through Zhao Fu's body. Zhao Fu disdainfully harumphed and raised the emperor-killing sword horizontally. He sent a powerful wave of power into it, causing the emperor-killing sword to give off an intense sword light. Boom! Zhao Fu slashed out, and a massive black crescent slashed out, giving off destructive power. The wooden spikes were shattered without any resistance, and wooden shards flew everywhere. The elder's expression slightly fell. At that moment, the people around him gave up on attacking. The middle-aged man gave off a powerful aura and held a saber. He leapt into the air and raised his saber as he hacked down towards Zhao Fu, giving off a powerful aura. Bang! Zhao Fu casually slashed out, sending out a wave of sword energy that sent the middle-aged man flying. The middle-aged man fell to the ground and coughed up a large mouthful of blood. He did not even have the strength to crawl up, and it seemed that he was heavily injured. A young man rushed at Zhao Fu from the side while Zhao Fu was attacking, and his spear gave off terrifying power as it stabbed toward Zhao Fu. Zhao Fu stretched out his hand and grabbed the incoming spear. The beautiful woman grasped this opportunity and held a sword as she gave off a powerful aura and rushed at Zhao Fu from the side. Her sword gave off a sharp sword light as she prepared to slash at Zhao Fu. Zhao Fu sent a wave of power into the hand that was holding the spear, and the young man was blasted away. Holding the spear, Zhao Fu vigorously threw it to the side, and the spear shot out with immense power. Chi! The spear flew out and pierced through the beautiful woman's chest. The spear pierced through her body and stabbed into the ground behind her, nailing her to the ground. I'll kill you. The elder looked incredibly hateful because this woman was his beloved, as well as his concubine. He raised his staff, which gave off a green light. The surrounding heaven and earth power continuously gathered, forming a massive spear that gave off shocking power. Boom! The elderly man waved his magic staff, and the wooden spear gave off immense piercing power as it shot toward Zhao Fu. It brought with it a powerful gale and seemed unstoppable. Sword Master! Zhao Fu lightly cried out, and a massive wave of sword chi flowed out from the Emperor Killing Sword, forming a massive sword wind that swept out. Xing! Zhao Fu swung the sword in his hand, and an incredibly sharp sword light instantly shot out, seeming to be able to slice apart everything. The wooden spear was split in half from top to bottom and shot towards either side of Zhao Fu. Looking at the elderly man, a trace of killing intent appeared in Zhao Fu's eyes as he said, "Since you're seeking death, don't blame me." Zhao Fu turned into a ray of light and rushed in front of the elderly man. The elderly man felt quite startled and swung his staff, giving off massive power as he smashed it towards Zhao Fu. Boom! Zhao Fu vigorously slashed out, sending out a massive black sword energy that sent the elderly man flying back. The elderly man crashed to the ground and coughed up a large mouthful of blood. Zhao Fu came to the elderly man's side and looked at the heavily injured elderly man. His fingers formed a claw and grabbed at the elderly man's abdomen and took out a green divinity. After losing the divinity, the elderly man was once again heavily injured and died. Chapter 1873. Zhao Fu looked at the young man and sent a restriction into the young man's body as he said, "Use your abilities to control this faction. If you can't do that, I'll kill you when I return." "Yes, yes, yes." The young man knelt on the ground and hurriedly nodded, not daring to refuse. Zhao Fu did not say anything else and turned into a ray of light as he flew into the sky and headed to the next faction. The godly spirit faction's people were sitting together, and a gentle-looking woman was sitting at the top, giving off a powerful godly spirit aura. She frowned and said, "Pantheon has only just been established, so how can they be so domineering? Don't they know that they are no match for 11 factions?" A handsome-looking young man next to her said, "Pantheon is seeking death, so they can't blame others. Do they think that just because they have the name Pantheon, they are invincible? Lord Godly Spirit, I think we should also attack Pantheon." A middle-aged man wearing armor smiled as he agreed, "I also support sending out troops. We won't let others take all the benefits. This time, I'll definitely bring back a large number of people for Lord Godly Spirit." At that moment, a gentle-looking woman said worriedly, "I don't think it's that simple. Just from a name, we can tell that it's not that simple. How can a faction be called Pantheon? For a power like that to act in such a tyrannical manner, it's impossible for them to be weak. Otherwise, they wouldn't dare to say such words." The handsome-looking young man said, "You're worrying too much. There are 13 godly spirit factions attacking Pantheon, so we have the absolute advantage. There's nothing to worry about." The gentle-looking woman sitting at the top also looked slightly worried as she said, "Let's wait and see if there's any news from the other factions." Boom! Just as she spoke, a massive aura descended and covered the entire faction, causing the air to seem to become heavy. Everyone's expressions fell as they felt a wave of fear. The person who had come was incredibly terrifying. Everyone hurriedly went outside and saw a cloaked figure holding a sharp sword and giving off a bloody stench appear in the sky. He looked down at them in a condescending manner. At that moment, Zhao Fu's cold voice sounded out, "Now, do you choose to submit or die?" The charming woman's face turned solemn. "Are you from Pantheon?" Zhao Fu's gaze fell on the gentle-looking woman's body as he replied, "I'm the Pantheon Palace's godly lord. I advise you to surrender as soon as possible. I've already killed more than 2 or 3 godly spirits. I don't mind killing a few more." Everyone's heart sank when they heard this. The smell of blood on that person's body was actually from the forces that had annihilated many divine spirits. No wonder Pantheon Palace dared to say such a thing. The strength of this divine master was too terrifying. However, it wasn't that easy to make a beautiful woman submit to him. The gentle and flirtatious woman thought for a moment before saying, "If you can defeat me, it means that my power is inferior to yours, and I will submit to you." A smile appeared on Zhao Fu's face. "Bring it on." The gentle-looking woman took out a whip that gave off a powerful, godly spirit aura. Seeing this, the others also took out their weapons and gave off powerful auras, wanting to follow the gentle-looking woman and attack Zhao Fu. However, the gentle-looking woman had them retreat. With their strength, charging up would just be committing suicide. Everyone could only obey and retreat, while the gentle-looking woman gave off a powerful, godly spirit aura and rushed at Zhao Fu. She vigorously swung the whip in her hand, and a powerful energy whipped toward Zhao Fu. Zhao Fu lightly laughed and stretched out a hand, causing an energy barrier to appear and block the incoming energy. The energy looked quite powerful, but when it hit Zhao Fu's energy barrier, it was not affected at all and did not even crack. The gentle-looking woman's expression became even more serious as she sent a powerful energy into the whip in her hand, causing it to give off a terrifying aura. "Pa! Pa! Pa!" The delicate-looking woman vigorously swung her whip, and the whip in her hand turned into many whip images that contained immense power as they lashed against the defensive barrier, giving off cracking sounds. However, no matter how she attacked, she was unable to break through Zhao Fu's barrier. At most, she could only leave a few cracks on the barrier. The gentle-looking woman did not believe this and exploded out with an even more powerful aura. She raised the whip in her hand and vigorously swung it, causing it to give off light as it spun and gave off powerful gales. A tornado giving off terrifying power was formed, giving off a power that seemed to be able to tear apart everything. The gentle-looking woman vigorously swung her whip, and the tornado formed from pure power gave off a might and a powerful attractive force as it rushed toward Zhao Fu. Zhao Fu dispelled the barrier and raised the emperor-killing swords around him. He sent a wave of power into them, causing them to give off intense sword light as he vigorously slashed out. Boom! An incredibly terrifying sword light containing shocking power slashed out and quickly slashed towards the tornado, causing it to turn into countless wild gusts of wind that spread out. The wind caused the corners of Zhao Fu's and the gentle-looking woman's clothes to flutter and flutter. Zhao Fu raised his sword and pointed at the gentle-looking woman, who had an unsightly expression, and he gave a trace of a confident smile as he said, "Do you still need me to act?" The gentle-looking woman shook her head and said, "I'm not a match for you. According to our promise, I'm willing to submit to you." Zhao Fu smiled and came before the gentle-looking woman. He stretched out his hand, and 6 orbs of demonic qi flowed out, forming 6 orbs of demonic qi. Zhao Fu then pressed his hand against the gentle-looking woman's abdomen, and the 6 orbs of demonic qi flowed into her. The gentle-looking woman's face immediately became red, and she rolled her eyes at Zhao Fu. It seemed that Zhao Fu was quite proper, and yet he used such a vulgar method. However, Zhao Fu quickly sealed that power and smiled as he said, "Gather your forces and join the Pantheon army and listen to the Pantheon army's orders. If you perform well, I'll give you the position of Palace Master." Hearing this, the gentle-looking woman gave a trace of a smile and said, "Thank you, God Lord." Zhao Fu did not say anything else and once again turned into a ray of light and disappeared over the horizon. The gentle-looking woman looked at where Zhao Fu had disappeared and understood that he had gone to subdue other godly spirit factions. With such a terrifying expert, there would be no surprises in this battle. The gentle-looking woman immediately gathered her forces and headed towards the Pantheon army. Since there were no surprises in this battle, she naturally had to perform well. The position that Zhao Fu had promised her would most likely not be low. Chapter 1874. Out of the 13 godly spirit factions, 7 of them had gathered together and planned to attack the Pantheon Palace. A gray-clothed man who gave off a ferocious aura said, "Let's hurry up. If we're too late, all the benefits will be taken by the nearby factions, and we'll have work for nothing." An elder next to him laughed as he said, "There's no need to be in such a hurry. The Pantheon Palace is made up of 5 godly spirit factions and has some strength. Let them fight for a while, and we'll go over to take advantage of them." A vulgar-looking fat man laughed as he said, "That's right. We should go slower and let them fight each other before taking advantage of us. Also, I heard that the Pantheon Palace is made up of 5 goddesses, and they're all very beautiful. It would be great if we could capture them to serve us." A valiant-looking big man said, "That's for sure. I haven't enjoyed having a goddess serve me as a servant yet. This is a good time to enjoy what it's like." The only goddess out of the 7 godly spirits frowned and did not like this group of people. If it wasn't for the fact that they would be able to attack the Pantheon Palace faster and with fewer losses, she would not want to attack the Pantheon Palace with them. Some of these people had bad reputations, and not only did they have perverted personalities, but they also liked to play with all sorts of women. Suddenly, a few guards ran over with flustered expressions and reported, "Lord, godly spirits, this is bad. Something big has happened." Hearing this, the godly spirits looked quite startled, and one of them asked, "What happened?" A guard bowed and said, "According to the information we received, the 5 godly spirit factions near the Pantheon Palace have all been destroyed, and some factions have even joined the Pantheon Palace." The godly spirits felt quite shocked. Weren't the godly spirits supposed to be attacking the Pantheon Palace? The Pantheon Palace was at a disadvantage while they were at a disadvantage. How had 5 godly spirit factions been destroyed so quickly? Just what's going on? Hurry up and explain. The elder's expression was quite unsightly as he hurriedly said to the guard. The guard immediately replied. A very terrifying expert appeared. He destroyed those godly spirit factions all by himself, and some godly spirits were also killed by him. Hearing this, the godly spirit's expressions became quite serious. Just who was that person, and how could he have such terrifying power? Just as a godly spirit was about to say something, boom! A massive sword light giving off a terrifying aura flew over from the distance, and the godly spirits sensed immense danger and hurriedly used their power to defend. Just as he blocked the attack, a figure giving off a powerful aura descended. He wore a black cloak and held a sharp sword in his hand. Sensing that person's aura, the godly spirit's expressions became quite unsightly. He didn't need to think too much to know who the person in front of him was. He was definitely the person who had destroyed so many god spirit factions. Zhao Fu coldly looked at the 7 godly spirits and gave off a powerful aura as he rushed in front of one of the godly spirits and slashed out with terrifying power. The godly spirit was given a big fright and hurriedly used his weapon to block in front of him, but he was still sent flying. The other godly spirits also used powerful attacks to attack Zhao Divine God. Cold lights containing terrifying power blasted towards Zhao Divine God. A powerful black defensive barrier appeared around Zhao Divine God's body, and the attacks slammed into the defensive barrier, resulting in massive sounds and causing gales to spread out. The attacks from the godly spirits were not weak at all, and the defensive barrier was now covered with cracks. Ark! The vulgar-looking fatty roared as he held a large hammer and gave off a ferocious aura as he rushed in front of Zhao Divine God and swung his hammer towards Zhao Divine God. Bang! The sledgehammer smashed into the cracked defensive barrier, shattering it and sending countless fragments flying in all directions. A look of delight appeared on the wretched-looking fatty's face. He had broken the defensive barrier of the person in front of him with a single strike. This person's strength was only SOSO, and they did not have to be too afraid of him. After shattering the defensive barrier, the vulgar-looking fatty swung his hammer at Zhao Divine God. Zhao Divine God gave a trace of a cold smile as he kicked out with his leg, hitting the fatty's abdomen and sending him flying. He heavily crashed to the ground and opened up a large crater. A few godly spirits grasped this opportunity and leapt into the air, giving off terrifying auras as they attacked Zhao Fu with ferocious auras. Zhao Divine God coldly harumphed and said, "Celestial mode. Activate." Boom! A massive aura exploded out from Zhao Divine God's body as a rainbow-colored aura flame erupted around Zhao Divine God's body. A rainbow-colored ring of runes appeared around him, and an intense might covered the surroundings. Facing the incoming godly spirits, Zhao Divine God stretched out a hand, and the ring of runes around him started to spin, giving off a terrifying power. Zhao Divine God stretched out his hand and pushed forwards. Bang! 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 The rainbow-colored ring of runes gave off shocking power as it spread out, sending the incoming godly spirits flying back, and the ring of runes dissipated. Swish, swish, swish. Seeing that the godly spirits were not a match for the godly spirits, the soldiers led by the godly spirits started to attack Zhao Divine God. Countless arrows containing shocking power shot out towards Zhao Divine God. Facing the countless incoming arrows, Zhao Divine God stretched out a hand towards the arrows, and a rainbow-colored magic formation appeared on his palm. Boom! A formless energy spread out, directly imprisoning the countless arrows in midair. The densely packed arrows were instantly imprisoned in midair. This scene was extremely shocking. Zhao Divine God pushed forwards. Swish, swish, swish. The countless frozen arrows turned around and gave off immense power as they shot towards the countless soldiers. Chi, 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 chi. The arrows descended like a torrential downpour, piercing through the soldiers' bodies, causing blood to fly everywhere and cries to continuously sound out. It was unknown just how many soldiers there were. Boom! A valiant-looking man exploded out with a powerful aura and rushed in front of Zhao Divine God. He sent a massive amount of power into his saber, causing it to give off an intense saber light as he ferociously slashed at Zhao Divine God. Zhao Divine God's expression was cold as he raised his sword and sent a wave of power into it, causing the sword to become rainbow-colored and give off shocking power. Shing! Zhao Divine God vigorously swung the sword in his hand, and a rainbow-colored arc of light containing extremely sharp power slashed out. The valiant-looking man's saber was cut in half, and his body was also split apart by the arc of light, causing blood to fly everywhere. Chapter 1875. The two halves of the fierce-looking man's corpse fell to the ground, and in that instant, Zhao Fu's body disappeared and reappeared in front of a vulgar-looking fatty. The vulgar-looking fatty's heart sank, and he felt a wave of fear as he quickly retreated, not daring to fight with Zhao Fu alone. He swung his sledgehammer, giving off ferocious energy and an intense wind as it slammed toward Zhao Fu. It seemed to be able to destroy a small mountain, and the sounds it gave off were quite shocking. Bang! Zhao Fu waved his hand, and a sword light slashed out, sending the sledgehammer flying. He then slashed out again, sending out a sharp sword light that slashed open the vulgar-looking fatty's head, causing blood to spurt out. The vulgar-looking fatty's headless corpse fell to the ground. Another godly spirit had died. All of the godly spirits present felt quite terrified. Now that two godly spirits had died, it was possible that they would be next. Boom! A massive aura exploded out. The soldiers were filled with hatred after seeing that the godly spirit had been killed, and countless traces of aura flowed out of their bodies. The aura continuously flowed out and condensed together, forming a scorpion-like creature that gave off a powerful aura. Boom! 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 The other godly spirit soldiers also exploded out with terrifying auras, forming different types of massive creatures. There were lions, tigers, rats, fish, dogs, and snakes, and they all gave off shocking might. The 7 massive creatures gave off powerful auras in the sky, causing the weather to change, creating a shocking scene. Roar! 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 The 7 massive creatures gave off massive roars that sounded out in all directions, and they gave off terrifying power as they rushed at Zhao Fu. Zhao Fu did not move, and a wave of power flowed out of his left eye's socket. The golden pupil became rainbow-colored and started to spin. Clang, 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 7 colored chains, giving off immense power, shot out from the ground, binding up the terrifying creatures. The creatures vigorously struggled and roared. Boom! A figure giving off a powerful aura appeared behind Zhao Fu. It was a ferocious-looking big man. He gripped a large sword with both hands and gave off terrifying power as he slashed toward Zhao Fu. Zhao Fu tilted his head slightly, his body still not moving. Clang, clang, clang. Chains containing immense power shot out from the ground and shot towards the ferocious big man with incredible speed. The burly man was shocked. He had wanted to launch a sneak attack on Zhao Fu, but to no avail. Instead, he had put himself in danger. The big man vigorously swung the large sword in his hand, and a powerful sword light slashed out, cutting apart the many chains that shot towards him. The big man quickly retreated. He understood how terrifying Zhao Fu was. Suddenly, the sound of chains once again sounded out as chains containing terrifying power shot towards the big man from all directions. It was impossible to tell just how many chains there were. The big man panicked and vigorously swung his sword, cutting apart many of the chains. However, many of the chains gave off ferocious power and pierced through the big man's body. Chi, chi, chi. Following this, even more chains containing shocking power pierced through the big man's body, causing blood to fly everywhere. The big man directly died, and his death was quite wretched. Zhao Fu looked at the enormous creatures in the sky, and he stretched out a hand and vigorously grabbed at them. The chains immediately tightened, causing the enormous creatures to explode and turn into countless traces of aura that spread out. The soldiers on the ground were affected, and their bodies trembled as they coughed up mouthfuls of blood, and their faces became pale. Zhao Fu looked at the soldiers, and his eyes widened as a terrifying power spread out from Zhao Fu's body. The chains containing terrifying power shot towards the soldiers. Arg! Pained cries sounded out as the soldiers' bodies were pierced by the arrows, causing blood to fly everywhere. It was unknown just how many of them had died. The remaining godly spirits looked terrified. The person in front of them was simply too terrifying. Not only was he able to stop 7 godly spirits by himself, but he was also able to stop an army of 7 million soldiers. Seeing how mercilessly he was slaughtering, they could tell that he was an incredibly savage person. Now, the 4 godly spirits did not want to continue fighting with Zhao Fu, and they understood that this was not the time for Zhao Fu. As such, they loudly gave the order to retreat. Hearing that the godly spirits wanted to retreat, Zhao Fu instantly disappeared and appeared behind a young man. He slashed out with a terrifying sword light, and before the young man could react, his body was split in half from head to toe, causing blood and organs to spill everywhere. After killing the young man, Zhao Fu's terrifying gaze fell on a cold-looking woman. The cold-looking woman with a graceful figure felt her hair stand on end as she felt immense terror, as if she was being stared at by a terrifying creature. Zhao Fu once again disappeared and gave off a terrifying aura as he appeared behind the woman. He raised his sword and gave off a powerful sword energy as he slashed towards her. In this moment of life and death, the cold-looking woman hurriedly said, "Don't kill me. I'm willing to submit to you." Zhao Fu immediately stopped and chased after the other 2 godly spirits. The 2 godly spirits were scared witless and desperately tried to run, but after finding that they could not escape, they hurriedly cried out, "We surrender as well. Please don't kill us." Hearing this, Zhao Fu gave a pleased smile and flew in the air, giving off a terrifying aura that covered the surroundings, causing the space around him to sink. "Those who submit to me will prosper. Those who oppose me will die." Zhao Fu's cold voice sounded out in the sky. The countless soldiers had been frightened by the massacre just then, and they knelt on the ground in terror, not daring to resist Zhao Fu. It was as if they were submitting to him. The 3 godly spirits also knelt on the ground in fear. Out of the 7 godly spirits that had come out, 4 had died at his hands. If they did not want to die, they could only submit to Zhao Fu. By now, the pantheon godly spirits and soldiers had arrived, and seeing this scene, they felt quite shocked. They did not even need to do anything. Zhao Fu had dealt with all of them by himself. Zhao Fu first destroyed 5 godly spirit factions, and Pantheon could go and subdue them. There was one faction that was surrounded by Pantheon, so they could only surrender. Next, Zhao Fu would take over the 7 godly spirit factions, which meant that he would have control over all 13 godly spirits, and the entire region would be unified. Zhao Fu did not participate in any of this, and he returned to Pantheon to wait for the results. Half a day later, the godly spirits returned to Pantheon and reported their gains. Chapter 1876. As for the other resources and treasures, there is no need to mention them. Zhao Fu's expression did not change much, as it was just 200 million residents. Qin City had hundreds of billions of people, and Yellow Springs had many people as well, so these 200 million people were not much of a surprise. However, the 5 goddesses were quite happy. The 240 million residents could provide large amounts of faith power, and they would become even stronger. With their abilities, they would not be able to obtain so many people. This was all because of Zhao Fu, and they felt quite pleased that they had made the right decision back then. Pantheon was developing too quickly, and it would definitely become an unimaginably powerful faction in the future. They would receive even more benefits, and their positions would become higher and higher. They would become the 5 temple lords with the most power in Pantheon. The nearby powers quickly received the news. It was impossible for them not to know that 13 powers had been annihilated. Immediately, they also fell into a state of shock. How could such a terrifying person appear here? He used his own power to subdue 5 godly spirits and establish the Pantheon Palace. Then, he quickly destroyed 13 godly spirit factions. By now, they had already unified that region. Pantheon had grown from nothing in such a short period of time, and its development speed was simply too fast. The danger it revealed was also immense. This forced the nearby factions to be careful and prepare to deal with the Pantheon temple that had appeared. The smaller factions were quite afraid of Pantheon, which was rising like a beast, and they were worried that they would be destroyed by Pantheon. If they did not ally together to resist Pantheon, they would seek protection from a powerful backer. Some of the larger factions also gathered people to discuss how to deal with Pantheon Temple. If Pantheon Temple dared to act against them, they would make Pantheon Temple pay a heavy price. They were currently somewhat fearful, but they did not fear Pantheon Temple. Many godly spirits were quite concerned about the name Pantheon. Did Pantheon's god, Lord, really want to rule over all godly spirits? This was quite domineering, but it was also quite difficult. After all, no godly spirit would easily submit to someone else. Now, it was time to see what the Pantheon Temple would do next. They would also come up with corresponding countermeasures. After Zhao Fu heard the news that they brought back, he told the 5 of them to properly manage and stabilize the situation. They had just conquered 13 factions, and it was the most unstable moment, causing the commoners to feel extremely uneasy. Following this, Zhao Fu took out the 5 divine deities and called over 5 people. This time, Zhao Fu had killed 5 godly spirits and needed to find 5 people to become new godly spirits. Even though he could revive the godly spirits that he had killed with the divine deity, Zhao Fu did not want to subdue those godly spirits. As such, he erased the souls within the divine deity and chose 5 people to become new godly spirits. There were 5 people in front of him, 2 women and 3 men, and they were all very young, about 20 years old or so. These people were all related to the previous gods. If they were not the children of the previous gods, then they were relatives. Zhao Fu looked at them and said, "You should know why I'm looking for you, right?" The 5 people looked incredibly excited and nervous because they were about to become high and mighty gods. They knelt on the ground and said in unison, "Understood. Thank you, God Lord, for thinking so highly of us. We are willing to forever be loyal to God Lord." Zhao Fu gave a trace of smile and tossed the 5 divine deities to them. The 5 people excitedly and nervously caught the 5 divine deities and knelt on the ground, once again expressing their gratitude to Zhao Fu. Zhao Fu stretched out his hand, and a wave of power flowed into their bodies, turning into restrictions that fused into their bodies. 5 or 6 days later, the situation had stabilized, and the 5 people had become new gods. The Pantheon Holy Scripture was also released, and Pantheon Holy Scripture made it seem like Pantheon Holy Scripture. Now, it was time to properly digest these factions and people and have them truly integrate into Pantheon Holy Scripture. By then, Pantheon Holy Scripture would be much more powerful than ordinary godly spirit factions, and they would be able to continue devouring ordinary godly spirit factions and continuously strengthen themselves without needing Zhao Fu to do anything. Following this, Zhao Fu brought the 13 godly spirits he had subdued to Pantheon Holy Scripture. There were now 13 statues here, and they were in the second row behind the 5 statues from before. The owners of these 13 statues were naturally the 13 godly spirits that Zhao Fu had subdued. If they performed well, they could become palace masters. If they did not perform well, they would not be able to become palace masters. Zhao Fu did not directly make them palace masters and give them the authority to rule. Out of the 13 godly spirits, there were old gods and new gods. Only the old gods had legacy power, which could strengthen the 10,000 god spears' legacy power. The reason why the new gods had come was because even though they could not strengthen the 10,000 god spears' legacy power, they could increase the 10,000 god spears' divine power. At that moment, Zhao Fu stood on the stage while the 13 godly spirits knelt below. Zhao Fu stretched out a hand towards the 13 godly spirits, and a formless suction force spread out. The 13 godly spirits' bodies continuously gave off different types of divine power, which turned into 13 streams of energy and flowed into Zhao Fu's body. The divine power they had was very useful to Zhao Fu, which was to awaken the god race's Emperor Star. Zhao Fu closed his eyes and continuously absorbed the endless divine power. His body gave off all sorts of divine light, and his body gave off a powerful godly spirit's might. After a while, the 13 godly spirits' faces became slightly pale. Zhao Fu had finished absorbing the divine power, and his godhood's power had become a bit stronger. Perhaps because the 13 godly spirits were not very powerful, absorbing their divine power did not increase his power by much. Zhao Fu first had them recover some power before having them send their power into the 10,000 god spear. Now, the 10,000 god spear could automatically devour divine power and legacy power, so there was no need for Zhao Fu to personally send that power into it. In the future, after Zhao Fu left the Pantheon Temple, the 10,000 god spear would continuously become stronger. The 13 godly spirits followed Zhao Fu's instructions and formed a circle with the 10,000 god spear at the center. They then stretched out their hands, and divine power flowed out of their hands and into the 10,000 god spear. As the 10,000 god spear absorbed the divine power and legacy power, it gave off all sorts of divine light, and its aura continuously became stronger. Boom! The 10,000 god spear exploded out with a terrifying aura, and boundless divine light shined out as it once again went through changes. The 13 godly spirits' faces became pale, and they withdrew their divine power. Zhao Fu went up and held the 10,000 god spear and found that its power had once again become much stronger. Its legacy power had also increased, and if this went on, the Pantheon Temple would definitely become a terrifying faction. Chapter 1877. Of the factions in the surroundings, the strongest faction had 1 billion people and 10 or so godly spirits, while the weakest faction had about the same population as the Jade Goddess. Those powerful factions were easier to deal with individually, but if they joined forces, Zhao Fu would feel some pressure. As such, he could not use the previous method, as it was possible that he would not be able to destroy them and would instead be destroyed. With Zhao Fu's strength, if those factions attacked, they would not be able to do anything to Zhao Fu, but they would not be able to protect the Pantheon Temple. After thinking about it, Zhao Fu decided that he could only use a softer method. As such, he set his sights on some minor, godly spirits. The Pantheon Temple was a religious faction, and it had a high concentration of faith and military power, which gave it some advantages. If godly spirits joined, they would receive more faith, but this would not be enough to attract godly spirits. They were high and mighty in their own faction and were not restricted at all. Why would they be restricted by your faction? In the past, Qin had done something similar. Back then, natural disasters had ravaged the Pantheon Temple, and Qin had relied on his powerful strength and natural disaster resistance to attract many city lords to join Qin. However, there was no pressure to force them to join Qin, so this method obviously would not work. Zhao Fu discussed with the people present for a while and could not come up with any good ideas. This was a sensitive period, and doing anything would make them wary, so it would be quite difficult to succeed. After thinking about it for a while, Zhao Fu could only not do anything for now and focus on stabilizing his faction. Now that the population had suddenly increased by 200 million, he needed to properly digest this. Now, Zhao Fu wanted to leave this place and head to the inner region and the central region to find things related to time. However, the Pantheon Temple only had 18 godly spirits and 16 million soldiers, which was not very strong. Once Zhao Fu left, it was possible that the Pantheon Temple would be destroyed by other factions. The Pantheon Temple had been established with great difficulty, and if it was destroyed, all of their previous efforts would have been in vain. He could not do anything to the surrounding factions, nor could he leave. As such, he could only obediently stay here. After thinking about it, Zhao Fu could only helplessly accept the current situation. Moreover, there were indeed some things that needed to be taken care of, such as the current Pantheon army. Even though they had the Pantheon attribute and could restrain other godly soldiers, without other means, they did not have much of an advantage. Also, the Pantheon Palace was empty and looked very cold. There was no one managing it. Zhao Fu thought that there was still a need for priests. Every god had a specialized priest, and the Pantheon was the center of the gods. For various reasons, the Pantheon should not lack the profession of priest. He had to deal with the Pantheon army first. Now that the Pantheon army only had one ability, how could he increase the number of methods he had? Qin now had a lot of means, but he had obtained a lot of inheritances and opportunities. But now the Pantheon Temple had not obtained any good opportunities and inheritances. So how could he develop his means? Zhao Fu asked the various godly spirits if they had any special abilities. As godly spirits, they indeed had some special abilities, such as turning things into jade, turning things into metal, and turning things into iron. These were all too ordinary and had no value. As such, Zhao Fu could only think of ways himself. Now that he could not obtain anything useful from the various godly spirits, he could only see what was useful from himself. Zhao Fu had quite a lot of powers, such as the 6 paths of reincarnation power, celestial power, demon lord power, godly spirit power, dragon emperor power, flower power, illusion power, killing sword power. If he used this spirit power to form an army of different abilities, the effects would be quite terrifying. After all, the various powers were extremely terrifying, and there were many of them added together. No one could deal with so much power, and for these powers to be fused into Zhao Fu's body was already a miracle. Now it was time to see if these powers could be used. Zhao Fu came to the platform where the 10,000 God Spear was and started to fuse different powers into the 10,000 God Spear. Now that the 10,000 God Spear was the legacy item of the Pantheon Palace, Zhao Fu could directly use it to affect everything. He wanted to see if he could use the 10,000 God Spear to give the soldiers some of Zhao Fu's weaker abilities, but the results were not as good as he had expected. Some powers were fused in, but they had no effect. Once they fused in, they would slowly dissipate. Some powers were even harmful to the 10,000 God Spear, such as the 6 paths of reincarnation power, demon lord power, dragon sovereign power, alien race power, etc. Most of these powers were related to Zhao Fu's bloodline or the Emperor's Star. After fusing these powers into the 10,000 God Spear, they directly destroyed the 10,000 God Spear's power and could not be used as a legacy power. Even though his plan might not succeed, Zhao Fu did not give up. After all, there were so many powers, and if he tried them all, perhaps one would be effective. In the end, Zhao Fu really did gain something. He found that there was a power that was very suitable for the 10,000 God Spear, and it could give the 10,000 God Spear another ability. With this ability, the soldiers would also be able to grasp this ability. That power was the Eye of the Emperor's power, which was the golden pupil in Zhao Fu's left eye socket. It could release countless chains, and it had originally been a king's crown. After Zhao Fu had fused with it, it had completely fused with Zhao Fu. Through continuous transformations, it had become a part of Zhao Fu's bloodline. By fusing this chain's power, the soldiers would not only condense the god-killing spear, but also the god-binding chains. Not only that, but every soldier would also be affected by the 10,000 God Spear and gain the ability to control chains. Of course, the chains they condensed would not be as strong as Zhao Fu's, but to ordinary soldiers, it was an advantage. At critical moments, they could release a chain to attack and use it to capture people. Every soldier had this ability, which would increase the Pantheon army's overall strength and abilities. As for why the chain's power could fuse with the 10,000 God Spear, Zhao Fu guessed that it had to do with the 5 godly spirits' legacy powers. 4 of the godly spirits' power was metal, and the 5th had something to do with it. The 10,000 God Spear's transformation not only fused with Zhao Fu's power, but also the 5 godly spirits' legacy powers. As such, the 10,000 God Spear had become a metal spear and not a stone spear, and the chain's power was also a type of metal power. Without wasting any time, Zhao Fu stood 2 meters away from the 10,000 God Spear and stretched out a hand towards it. Boom! A powerful power exploded out from Zhao Fu's body, and the golden pupil in Zhao Fu's left eye rapidly spun, giving off intense golden light. Clang, clang, clang. Chapter 1878. Clang, clang, clang. The 10,000 God Spear continuously trembled as it absorbed the massive chain's power, giving off clanging sounds as a powerful sealing power spread out. Zhao Fu's chains also had sealing power, and now the 10,000 God Spear was inheriting this power. After a while, the 10,000 God Spear had absorbed a large amount of chain's power and started to fuse. At that moment, Zhao Fu stopped sending power into the 10,000 God Spear. He looked at the faintly glowing 10,000 God Spear and waited for it to finish fusing. Boom! An hour later, the 10,000 God Spear gave off an intense light as a terrifying power spread out. Clang, 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 platinum-colored chains giving off terrifying power shot out into the air and continuously extended, covering the entire God Palace. They were all made up of platinum chains. Even though these chains were incredibly fast, they did not harm Zhao Fu, nor did they destroy the temple or the statue. Zhao Fu looked at the platinum-colored chains in shock. Now that the Pantheon Temple had absorbed the chain's power, their attributes had changed, and they had fused Zhao Fu's chain's power into their own. In other words, these chains' attributes were completely different from the ones that Zhao Fu had released. Even though these chains had the same power as Zhao Fu's chains, their core power was the 10,000 God power. As such, these chains should be called 10,000 God chains. They also had the power to suppress godly spirits, and they would become stronger along with the 10,000 God Spear. The more powerful the 10,000 God Spear was, the more powerful the 10,000 God chains would be. Zhao Fu gave a trace of a smile as he stretched out his hand and gripped the 10,000 God Spear, causing the platinum-colored chains to retract into the spear. Following this, Zhao Fu gathered the soldiers who had gone up. The Pantheon Temple soldiers were all wearing a holy white color, which was different from Qin's solemn black color. They were fighting on behalf of the godly spirits, so their armor was filled with holiness and majesty. The myriad god spear now had an additional chain ability. Now that the soldiers' attributes had also been affected, they also gained an additional chain ability, which was condensed from the myriad gods' power within their bodies. At that moment, Zhao Fu ordered the soldiers to use the chains to see how powerful they were. The soldiers obeyed Zhao Fu's orders and lined up in a row. They stretched out a hand, and a wave of 10,000 deities' power gathered in their hand, giving off a bronze light. Clang, clang, clang. Sound of chains rang out as bronze chains shot out from their palms, bringing with them an immense force as they shot out. The bronze chains could stretch 10 or so meters, but could not go any further, and they did not seem to be very powerful. Of course, this was from Zhao Fu's point of view. Let the soldiers use the bronze chains to attack other Stage 1 soldiers. One of the soldiers swung the bronze chain in his hand and whipped it towards another soldier in front of him. The soldier held a large saber and sent a wave of energy into it, causing it to give off an intense light. He vigorously slashed out, sending out a sharp saber light towards the incoming bronze slash. Clang! When the saber light struck the bronze chain, sparks flew everywhere. The bronze chain was not cut apart by the saber light, and it continued to fly towards the soldier, binding him up. The soldier struggled with all his might, but he was unable to break free. From the looks of it, the bronze chains were quite powerful. After all, they contained 10,000 deities' power and could not be easily destroyed by ordinary soldiers. Following this, Zhao Fu called over the Jade Goddess and had the 1,000 soldiers unleash their power. Boom! A powerful aura exploded out from the soldiers' bodies and gathered together, giving off a shocking aura. The Jade Goddess looked quite startled, but she did not dare be careless and waved her hand, sending out a jade-colored defensive barrier. Clang, clang, clang. The bronze chains gave off immense force as they shot into the sky incredibly quickly, covering the defensive barrier that the Jade Goddess had unleashed and pulling it down. The Jade Goddess' expression slightly changed, and she controlled the defensive barrier to fly upwards. The soldiers below once again controlled the bronze chains to once again pull down the defensive barrier that the Jade Goddess had released. At that moment, the Jade Goddess frowned and felt that these bronze chains were quite difficult to deal with. Not only did they have the power to suppress godly spirits, but they also had some sealing power. Boom! The Jade Goddess used her true godly spirit power, and a terrifying shockwave spread out, destroying the bronze chains. Zhao Fu had the soldiers stop attacking and gave a trace of a smile as he said to the Jade Goddess in the sky, "What do you think of these chains?" The Jade Goddess gave a trace of a smile and flew down from the sky, saying, "It's quite powerful. If many soldiers used it, I wouldn't be able to break free at all." Zhao Fu gave a satisfied smile. This ability had not killed Zhao Fu. The Jade Goddess said worriedly, "You always create things that are very harmful to godly spirits. Even I'm afraid of you now." Zhao Fu smiled as he said, "Don't worry. As long as you listen to me, I definitely won't do anything to you. In the future, you will still be one of the Pantheon Temple's highest-ranking temple masters." The Jade Goddess happily smiled and nodded. She was the first person to follow Zhao Fu, so she had an advantage that others did not have. Now, the Pantheon Temple's army had an additional chain ability, which greatly increased their overall battle power. Moreover, it could suppress godly spirits, so the problem of nurturing godly spirits had been resolved. Now it was time to decide on the priests. Zhao Fu smiled as he said to the Jade Goddess, "Send out my orders to pick out beautiful women. The Pantheon Temple needs priests." The Jade Goddess faintly looked at Zhao Fu as she said, "Why do we need beautiful women? I feel that men are quite good. If you need anything, just tell me." Zhao Fu lightly laughed as he said, "That won't do. It would be quite strange if the Pantheon Temple only had a group of male priests." The Jade Goddess sighed and said, "All right then, She then looked at Zhao Fu and said with a slightly red face, "However, you can't do anything to them. If you want anything, you can come and find me." Zhao Fu smiled and nodded, understanding what she meant. The Jade Goddess's face was red as she happily left and passed on Zhao Fu's orders to start picking out beautiful women in the Pantheon Temple. A day later, the Jade Goddess picked out 100 or so beautiful women with decent talent from the 200 million or so residents and brought them to the Pantheon Temple. Chapter 1879. Zhao Fu looked at the many beauties that the Jade Goddess had brought. The 4 women standing at the front were the most beautiful. One had a fiery figure and tan skin, making her look quite alluring. One looked quite quiet and had fair skin. One had a graceful figure and gave off a pure aura, and one had a slim figure and looked quite gentle. The Jade Goddess smiled as she said, "I've helped you choose your people. Aren't they all quite good?" Zhao Fu smiled and nodded. Seeing that Zhao Fu was pleased with them, the women all gave happy smiles and knelt toward Zhao Fu as they said in unison, "We greet the God Lord." Zhao Fu smiled as he said, "You can all rise." The women got up from the ground and gave a trace of a smile. Looking at the legendary God Lord, their hearts beat quite quickly. Zhao Fu took out the 10,000 God Spear. Since he had chosen these women to be sacrifices, they would not just be sacrifices in name. They most likely had power. Holding the spear, Zhao Fu lightly stabbed at them, causing the 10,000 God Spear to give off an intense platinum-colored light, and a massive wave of power flowed into the women's bodies. The women naturally understood that this was the power that Zhao Fu had given them, and it was a massive opportunity. They excitedly absorbed that wave of power, and as that wave of power covered their bodies, they went through changes. A while later, Zhao Fu felt quite surprised. After absorbing the 10,000 God Spear's power, the women's eyes became platinum-colored, and their bodies gave off the aura of 10,000 gods. They also became more beautiful than before. What caught Zhao Fu's attention was that there was a mark below their throats. This mark had the upper body of a human and the lower body of a snake. It was not very big, only a bit bigger than a coin. It was platinum-colored and gave off a strange and mysterious aura. Wasn't this the appearance of the monster that he had discovered in the Forbidden Area? Thinking of this, Zhao Fu almost forgot about the 10,000 God Spear's original abilities. The 10,000 God Spear was the stone spear from before, and it had the ability to mutate people. It would make people ugly and savage, and their lower bodies would turn into a snake's tail. However, it also had the ability to use sound to hypnotize people. Now that Zhao Fu had given the power of the sacrifice to the women, not only did they become more beautiful, but they also became more powerful. He had only used a mark on their bodies and did not cause any changes to occur to them. He didn't know if he had inherited the ability to hypnotize others with his voice. That power was still very terrifying. Back then, even with the support of various powers of Zhao Fu, he still almost fell asleep. If this was used to deal with enemies, it would naturally be very useful. Thinking about it, even Zhao Fu could not block it easily. How could the other soldiers resist it? That was almost impossible. This could become the Pantheon Temple's killer move. Once it appeared, it would obtain the final victory. Zhao Fu did not celebrate too early. Instead, he first asked for confirmation. Now that you have obtained the power of 10,000 gods, do you feel any other changes? Or did he obtain any abilities? The woman with a gentle aura smiled as she said, "God Lord, we have obtained an ability that allows us to give off the most beautiful sound and cause people to fall asleep." Zhao Fu felt at ease and smiled. He had indeed inherited that ability, so he said, "Now, show me which ability you have." Hearing this, the women straightened their bodies and postures and gave off beautiful, holy, and dignified voices. They did not seem as evil as before. Immediately, Zhao Fu felt his consciousness become hazy, and a wave of sleepiness flooded into his mind. He quickly lay down on the ground and fell asleep. Facing this singing, Zhao Fu was prepared. His divine bloodline flowed through his body, and a wave of energy spread out. Zhao Fu immediately became clear-headed, and the drowsiness disappeared. Beside him, the Jade God's eyes slightly narrowed, and she also felt quite sleepy. However, she released a wave of divine power and quickly woke up. She looked at Zhao Fu in shock and said, "What kind of ability is this? It feels quite terrifying. It's a little scary. If I was a little weaker, I might have fallen asleep just now." Zhao Fu smiled as he said, "This is one of the stone spear's original abilities. It wasn't like this before, but it has been improved." The Jade God responded with an "oh," but he still looked at the women with a shocked expression. Facing their gazes, the women smiled. They understood that not only had they obtained 10,000 gods' power, but they had also obtained a terrifying ability. Zhao Fu gave a trace of smile as he said, "Later, record the singing. It will be the Pantheon Palace's anthem in the future." "Yes," the women said in unison. Zhao Fu's gaze fell on the four women in front of him, and he smiled as he said, "In the future, the Pantheon Palace will be managed by the four of you." The four women smiled in delight and bowed to Zhao Fu as they said, "Thank you, God Lord, for choosing us. We definitely won't let God Lord down." Following this, Zhao Fu had them leave. After they left, Zhao Fu smiled as he said to the Jade Goddess next to him, "I'll have to trouble you to pick out some people with good talent. We'll need both men and women." Hearing this, the Jade Goddess said in delight, "Will there be many more of those priests?" Zhao Fu smiled as he nodded. "With the Pantheon Palace's current scale and legacy power, we can have 10,000 more priests. If they go onto the battlefield, they'll be able to produce shocking results." The Jade Goddess lightly laughed as she said, "I'll go and pick them now." Zhao Fu nodded, and the Jade Goddess turned and left. After another day, the 10,000 people were picked. There were both men and women, and they were all in their 20s. They were now standing below a stage, and Zhao Fu held the 10,000 God Spear as he stood on the stage. "Greetings, God Lord." The 10,000 people all knelt and looked incredibly respectful as they called out in unison. Zhao Fu gave a trace of a smile as he raised the spear in his hand and sent a massive wave of power into it. Boom! The 10,000 God Spear gave off an intense light that covered the countless people below the stage, and a massive wave of power continuously flowed into their bodies. They also felt a massive wave of power flow into their bodies, and they looked incredibly excited. They knew what Zhao Fu's goal was. If they could be put in an important position by Zhao Fu, their statuses would definitely be incredibly high in the future. The massive wave of power continuously flowed into their bodies, and after a while, Zhao Fu put away the 10,000 God Spear, and the countless people below the stage completed their transformations. His eyes became platinum-colored, and his body gave off 10,000 gods' power as a mark appeared below his throat. Chapter 1880. More than a week had passed, and during that time, Pantheon had been developing peacefully and had not done anything. The situation in the surroundings had gradually stabilized, and the enmity towards Pantheon was not as great as before. By now, the five goddesses were lying on the ground, and Zhao Fu stood beside them. His eyes had become blood-red roses and gave off a demonic and bewitching aura. Traces of black aura rose up from the ground and continuously flowed into the five goddesses' bodies. The five goddesses' bodies gave off all sorts of divine light, defending against the invasion of the black aura. Now, Zhao Fu was testing to see if he could control the five goddesses with the evil demon flower pupils. If he could control the five godly spirits, Zhao Fu would be able to sneak into some weaker factions and control their godly spirits to have them join Pantheon. The black aura continuously invaded, and the five goddesses continuously gave off divine power to defend. It seemed that controlling godly spirits was not easy. Zhao Fu was quite careful, and he could control the demonic aura to silently enter the godly spirits' bodies. However, the godly spirits' divinities would give off divine light to defend, making it impossible for Zhao Fu to control them. Zhao Fu's eyes widened, and an even greater wave of demonic aura flowed out, giving off a powerful aura as it flowed towards the 5 godly spirits' bodies. The 5 godly spirits' bodies gave off even more intense divine light, defending against the invasion of the demonic aura. The powerful demonic aura continuously flowed towards the 5 godly spirits, and even though the divine light blocked it, traces of demonic aura still flowed into the 5 godly spirits' bodies and started to control them. However, this was quite slow, and the traces of demonic aura were not enough to instantly control the 5 godly spirits. After thinking about it, Zhao Fu sent a massive wave of demonic aura into his eyes, and his blood-red rose-like eyes gave off a demonic light. Suddenly, pale white roots that were as big as ropes started to grow from the ground, and they gave off an evil aura as they stretched towards the 5 godly spirits lying on the ground. The 5 divine spirits released divine light to block the pale white roots that extended over, but it was clear that the divine light could not stop them. The countless roots extended over the 5 divine spirits' bodies and wrapped around their bodies, looking densely packed. A massive wave of nefarious devil power flowed into the godly spirits' bodies, and even though the godly spirits' godheads gave off powerful lights, they were unable to resist the nefarious devil power. The demonic power continuously flowed into the godly spirit's body, taking control of every part of its body. It then wrapped around the godhood, invaded the brain, and took control of the godly spirit's soul. Zhao Fu smiled and waved his hand. Hearing that Zhao Fu was an emperor, the goddesses were not too surprised. From Zhao Fu's management methods, he would definitely be the leader of a powerful faction. Under Zhao Fu's leadership, that faction would definitely become incredibly powerful. Now, the Pantheon God Palace had a terrifying faction supporting it, making them feel much more at ease. In the end, Zhao Fu finally told them his true identity. This meant that Zhao Fu trusted them greatly, making them feel quite happy. However, they also knew that Zhao Fu was truly terrifying. He was someone who could shake the entire heaven-awakened world. The bronze goddess suddenly thought of something and said flirtatiously, "God Lord, since you're an emperor, you should have many concubines, right? When will you be able to pamper us?" Hearing this, the 4 women's breathing became ragged, and a faint blush appeared on their faces as they looked at Zhao Fu seductively. Zhao Fu smiled as he said, "In the future, follow my orders. Now, according to my orders, release the news that the Pantheon Temple will no longer expand to the outside and sincerely invite all the gods to join. Also, pick out various gifts and send them to the surrounding factions to express the Pantheon God Palace's goodwill and reduce their wariness towards the Pantheon God Palace." The 5 goddesses could already guess what Zhao Fu was going to do, so they smiled and nodded before leaving. Following this, the Pantheon God Palace's news quickly spread, and all sorts of gifts were sent to the surrounding factions. Chapter 1881. But why was it behaving in such a friendly and harmless manner, almost like a docile lamb? Perhaps Pantheon really was afraid of them, so they had become well-behaved. Now that they heard that Pantheon would not expand and was willing to get along with everyone, the various factions breathed a sigh of relief. They did not want to be threatened by a faction. They also relaxed their vigilance towards Pantheon. Of course, they were not so stupid as to completely let down their vigilance towards Pantheon. Facing the various gifts from Pantheon, most of the smaller factions did not dare to refuse. After all, Pantheon was a relatively large faction, and they did not want to offend them. As such, they accepted the gifts. Apart from a few small forces with powerful backers, these small forces were not very afraid of the Pantheon Temple because they had the backing of powerful forces. As for the surrounding factions, some were friendly while others were hostile. They were relatively strong, so they did not need to worry about Pantheon. There were even a few factions that did not appreciate the gifts and wanted to start a war against Pantheon. Zhao Fu did not respond to this because they had not attacked yet. Right now, Zhao Fu's mind was on other plans, which were to sneak into the Godly Spirit faction and take control of the Godly Spirit. The sun set and the moon rose. It was now nighttime, and Zhao Fu began to make his move. Zhao Fu had already investigated the surrounding smaller factions, so he could make his move against them. Zhao Fu's first target was a small godly faction closest to Pantheon. It was a beast god, and it was similar to the Jade Goddess. It had hundreds of thousands of troops and millions of people. With Zhao Fu's current cultivation, it would be very difficult for anyone to discover him if he sneaked into his faction. At this time, the godly faction would either be asleep or sitting cross-legged under the statue, absorbing the faith power that had gathered. When Zhao Fu sneaked into this godly faction, the godly faction was already asleep. There were soldiers standing guard outside, and it was the most difficult place to sneak in. However, they were unable to obstruct Zhao Fu in the slightest. At this time, Zhao Fu was hiding in a corner. His eyes had already turned into blood-red roses. His pupils opened slightly, and strands of black demonic energy silently emerged from the ground. It quickly flowed into their feet, and then through their feet, it flowed to every part of their bodies. Immediately, all of the soldiers standing guard outside had black eyes and gave off an evil and strange aura before their eyes returned to normal and the aura around them disappeared. Zhao Fu didn't have any more worries. He walked out from the corner and came to the door of the room. He carefully sent his mind in. A godly spirit with a goat's head and a human body was lying on the bed. A wave of power gathered in his eyes, and a demonic light shone out from his eyes. Pale white roots slowly extended from the ground towards the god on the bed. Now, Zhao Fu felt quite nervous. He had only tested it on 5 godly spirits and had not used it on any other godly spirits, so he didn't know what would happen. Perhaps something unexpected had happened, or perhaps he hadn't thought things through. The pale white tendrils slowly stretched onto the bed, and suddenly, the pale white tendrils sped up, wrapping around the sheep god. Without giving it any time to react, a massive wave of demonic energy flowed into it and continuously corroded its body. After a while, Zhao Fu put away the countless pale white roots. The goat godly spirit's body was now controlled by the demonic energy, and Zhao Fu sent a trace of his mind into the goat godly spirit's body. He immediately obtained control of the goat godly spirit's body, and it was as if he had gained another body. Apart from this method of control, Zhao Fu didn't even need to use his own thoughts. He could just use the demonic energy to control it. The benefit of this was that it was like controlling a clone. No matter what happened to the clone, it would not harm Zhao Fu's main body. Moreover, there was no limit to how many clones he could control, and he could control as many as he wanted. That was how terrifying the evil spirit abyss flower's abilities were. Of course, only the flower ancestor had this sort of ability. Other people who obtained the evil spirit abyss flower would not have this sort of ability. Who are you? The goat godly spirit's body cried out in terror. It was the voice of the goat godly spirit's main body. Zhao Fu smiled as he replied, Pantheon God Palace's Lord God. The goat godly spirit's heart sank, and he felt quite terrified because his body had been controlled by this Pantheon God Palace's Lord God. It was said that the Pantheon God Palace's Lord God was an incredibly savage and ruthless person. Anyone who angered him would even kill his own people. Sensing his fear, Zhao Fu's smile became even brighter as he said, Right now, you only have 2 choices. The first is to submit to the Pantheon Palace, and the second is for me to wipe out your soul and turn your body into a puppet before controlling your body to join the Pantheon Palace. Facing these 2 choices, the goat godly spirit was not stupid. Since he had to submit anyway, he was quite decisive. Lord God, I'm willing to submit to you. I'm willing to submit to you. Please don't kill me. Zhao Fu gave a pleased smile and withdrew his consciousness, and the goat godly spirit regained control of his body. The goat godly spirit let out a sigh of relief, but he did not dare to do anything because the demonic energy had turned into powerful restrictions that covered his body. If he dared to do anything, he would die without a doubt. Zhao Fu pushed open the door and walked in, and the goat, godly spirit, immediately got off the bed and knelt on the ground. "I greet Lord God Palace." Hearing this, Zhao Fu smiled as he said, "Don't reveal this for now. Tomorrow, act as if you're willing to join the Pantheon God Palace. Remember not to reveal anything." The goat, godly spirit, did not dare to refuse and obeyed. Yes. Zhao Fu gave a trace of a smile and did not say anything else before soundlessly disappearing. Only after seeing Zhao Fu leave did the goat, godly spirit, relax and think to himself in shock, was this the terrifying power of the Pantheon God Palace's Lord God? It really wasn't fake. A single person could rule over so many godly spirits. After leaving the goat, godly spirits faction, Zhao Fu quickly went to another faction. This faction's godly spirit was a river god, and the god palace was near a large river. When Zhao Fu snuck in, the godly spirit was not sleeping and was instead sitting cross-legged within the god palace with its eyes closed, absorbing the faith energy around it. The godly spirit was a woman with a graceful figure and tender skin. She wore a palace dress and had light blue hair. She looked quite young and was most likely a new god. Chapter 1882. There was also a group of soldiers standing guard outside, which made things more difficult. The godly spirit and the soldiers had to deal with them together. This was because if they attacked the soldiers, the godly spirit absorbing faith energy would sense it. Once the godly spirit sensed it and reacted, Zhao Fu would be discovered, and the plan would fail. Zhao Fu thought about it and went to a hidden corner. His eyes once again became blood-red roses and gave off a demonic light. A demonic aura flowed out from his body, causing him to seem quite terrifying. Zhao Fu half squatted down and placed a hand on the ground. A powerful wave of demonic energy flowed into the ground, and a black magic formation spread out from beneath Zhao Fu's body, giving off a faint black light and a dense evil aura. Zhao Fu closed his eyes, and a formless energy spread out. Everything in the surrounding tens of thousands of kilometers was within Zhao Fu's senses. No matter who it was, what creature it was, even a mosquito, nothing could escape from Zhao Fu's senses. Now, Zhao Fu was using one of the evil spirit abyss flower's powers. Through this sense, Zhao Fu understood all of the information about the God Palace. For example, where the godly spirit was and where the guards were. This godly spirit was quite careful. Apart from the guards on the surface, there were also soldiers in some hidden places. However, now that Zhao Fu had seen through all of this was useless. Zhao Fu once again pressed down with his hand on the ground, and a massive wave of demonic energy flowed out of the ground and slowly spread towards the God Palace. Soon, the ground beneath the God Palace was covered. At that moment, Zhao Fu, who had his eyes closed, gave a trace of a smile. Since they had not sensed anything off, they would not have a chance. Swish, 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 countless pale white roots did not stretch out slowly like before. Instead, they stretched out from the ground at an extremely fast speed, not giving the soldiers and the gods any time to react. They were densely packed and wrapped around them like a cocoon formed by the roots. A massive wave of demonic energy flowed into their bodies, and the ordinary guards were naturally unable to resist at all. The godly spirit exploded out with a powerful aura, and the divinity within his body continuously trembled, giving off intense light as he tried to resist the demonic energy. Zhao Fu coldly harumphed and once again pressed down on the ground, causing a massive wave of demonic energy to flow into the ground. Even more pale white vines shot out from the ground and covered the godly spirit's body, and an even greater wave of demonic energy flowed into the godly spirit's body. The godly spirit's body trembled and was unable to resist the demonic energy at all. As the demonic energy continuously flowed in, the godly spirit lost control of his body. Zhao Fu opened his eyes and smiled as he stood up and walked towards the god palace. After of this, Zhao Fu looked at the river god and looked at the countless pale white vines of the god above the god. It revealed the river god who was sitting cross-legged on the carpet. Or were they forced to serve me? The river god said angrily, "Is there no other choice?" Zhao Fu chuckled and said, "You've already fallen into my hands. What other choice do you want?" The river god fell into deep thought and made a decision. "All right, I can submit to you and give you your hand." Zhao Fu could not help but laugh, and a wave of 6 desires demonic chi flowed into the river god's body, causing a wave of heat to spread through his body. The river god's face became bright red, and he angrily glared at Zhao Fu. "Do you still want me to take my hand off you?" Zhao Fu had an evil smile on his face as he caressed the river god's face. The river god couldn't help but reveal an expression of enjoyment. She was too embarrassed to speak because she really enjoyed this feeling. She didn't know what power that bastard Zhao Fu had used. "Give them to me." The river deity blushed, and her eyes were covered with a layer of mist. She couldn't help but say this seductively. Zhao Fu lightly laughed and sealed the 6 desires demonic chi within the river god's body. The river god returned to normal, and thinking about his request, the river god felt incredibly ashamed. She angrily looked at Zhao Fu, unable to say anything. Zhao Fu smiled as he said, "Tomorrow, you'll join the Pantheon Palace, understand?" The river god lightly harumphed and did not reply to Zhao Fu's words. Zhao Fu's smile faded, and he prepared to once again stretch out his hand. The river god immediately said in fear, "I understand. I'll join the Pantheon Palace tomorrow." A trace of a smile appeared on Zhao Fu's face as he once again disappeared and went to another godly spirit faction. This faction had a flower goddess, but what was strange was that this flower goddess was not a woman, but a fat man who was not very good-looking. This was because his true form was a type of wolf venom flower, which looked like a lily and was black. However, it was quite bloated and looked quite ugly. It also had a very unpleasant smell and was extremely poisonous. After arriving at his faction, Zhao Fu found that he was sleeping on a bed with 2 handsome men. There are not many guards in the surroundings, and it seemed that this faction was attached to a powerful faction. It did not seem to be worried about anyone attacking it, and this faction did not give any face to the Pantheon Palace. Zhao Fu did not hesitate, and sensed that there was no danger around him. He pressed a hand against the ground, and a massive wave of demonic energy flowed out. Pale white tendrils shot out from the ground and quickly shot towards the 3 people on the bed. The ugly fatty was not weak and immediately sensed danger. Seeing the countless pale white tendrils shooting at him, the ugly fatty kicked the handsome man beside him and sent him flying toward the countless pale white tendrils. Zhao Fu's gaze gave off a cold intent as he released a barrier around the room, and an even greater wave of demonic energy flowed into the ground. The tendrils shot towards the handsome man, and even more tendrils suddenly stretched out as the ugly fatty exploded out with an aura. However, the tendrils flooded over him. Soon, the ugly fatty was bound by the pale white tendrils and lost the ability to resist. Zhao Fu's consciousness entered the fatty's body. The ugly fatty looked at Zhao Fu in terror and cried out, "Who are you? Don't kill me." Zhao Fu coldly harumphed and did not have any intentions of subduing him, as he had been quite rude to the Pantheon Palace today. Countless traces of black, demonic energy devoured the ugly fatty's soul. Zhao Fu had taken over the fatty's body and obtained some of the fatty's memories. He glanced at them and did not pay too much attention. Chapter 1883. That night, Zhao Fu controlled 12 godly spirits, and seeing that it was already dawn, he stopped. During this time, the plan went quite smoothly, and no one noticed anything. These godly spirits were the weakest in the surroundings, and they were the closest to the Pantheon Palace. After controlling them, they could directly fuse into the Pantheon Palace and greatly increase the Pantheon Palace's strength. As for some godly spirits, they were either quite far away or quite powerful, and Zhao Fu could not control them, so he could only give up. After returning to the Pantheon Palace, Zhao Fu started to wait. The various factions were the same as before, and Zhao Fu looked over at the sheep god's faction. Seeing that the sky had brightened, the sheep god gathered the important figures of the various factions to the Pantheon Palace. After coming here, everyone felt quite confused and did not know what was going on. The sheep god sat on the throne and looked incredibly devout as he said, "I've already sensed the Pantheon Palace's god Lord's majestic summons. I believe that he is the god that I believe in and your master." Hearing this, everyone looked quite confused. Yesterday, the sheep god had looked incredibly fearful of the Pantheon Palace and had been worried that the Pantheon Palace would attack them. Why had he changed so much in just one night? Moreover, he looked incredibly devout towards the Pantheon Palace. The sheep god continued, "The reason why I called you all here is to tell you that I plan to submit to the Pantheon Palace and become one of its godly spirits. I will forever be loyal to our great God Lord, and under his radiance, we will definitely live better lives." Hearing this, everyone was not too surprised. After all, the sheep god had said that he wanted to submit to the Pantheon Palace's god Lord, so they naturally thought that the sheep god would submit to the Pantheon Palace. It was just that the sheep god looked like he was sucking up to the Pantheon Palace's god Lord. He was an incredibly noble, godly spirit, and everyone had to respect and believe in him. How could this be? Was this still the godly spirit that they believed in? Right now, the sheep god felt incredibly nervous because he could sense Zhao Fu's consciousness entering his body. If he did not give the order to submit to the Pantheon God Palace, he would definitely die. Then he would immediately lose control of his body. With Zhao Fu in control, he would die a horrible death. At the same time, the goat god thought about how he had already submitted to Zhao Fu, so he naturally had to put on a good performance. Facing a terrifying person like Zhao Fu, even though he was a godly spirit, he had to flatter him. At that moment, a young man could not help but remind, "Esteemed God, you must understand that submitting to others also means that you will have to listen to their orders. Your status and authority will be reduced." Hearing this, the sheep-headed god coldly rebuked, "Submitting to the great Pantheon God Palace's God Lord is a supreme honor. His appearance is to rule over all gods. Do you think I shouldn't submit to him? Shouldn't listen to him? Is power and status still important?" When the young man heard these words, he was so frightened that he hurriedly knelt on the ground. "Respected God, I have no objections. I am also willing to pledge allegiance to the great Pantheon Palace Godmaster." The people in the surroundings understood that the sheep-headed god was determined to submit to the Pantheon Palace regardless of any obstacles. The sheep-headed god was the leader of a faction, and since he had chosen to submit, they could not stop him. They could only half kneel and say in unison, "We are willing to pledge allegiance to the great Pantheon Palace God Master." Hearing this, the sheep-headed god gave a satisfied smile and gave out all sorts of orders. He collected all sorts of resources and told the commoners not to panic, and he had the soldiers strengthen security and make preparations to submit to the Pantheon Palace. Everyone obeyed the sheep-headed god's orders and turned to leave. "You've done well." Zhao Fu's voice sounded out in the sheep-headed god's mind. The sheep-headed god said in delight, "Of course, it is my honor to pledge allegiance to Sir God Master." Zhao Fu lightly laughed and withdrew his consciousness from the sheep-headed god's body. Only then did the sheep-headed god let out a sigh of relief. The River God Palace's river god saw that it was already bright and gathered the various city lords and generals. A slim and vivacious-looking woman came first. She had a good relationship with the river god. Seeing that the river god's face was still red, she smiled and hugged his arm as she said, "Sir River God, did you ask that handsome man to serve you last night? He looks so pretty and alluring today." The river god rolled his eyes at the woman and said, "I'm not that kind of woman." The woman came up to the river god's face and gave a teasing smile as she said, "Why is your face so red? Also, you have the scent of a man on you. I don't believe that nothing happened last night." The river god could not help but think of the scene of Zhao Fu flirting with her, and she said shyly and angrily, "Nothing happened between me and that bastard. All right, stop fooling around. People will be here soon." The woman looked quite surprised. Something had really happened between the river god and a man last night, and seeing how red the river god was, it must have been quite something. Who was that man? Who could make a godly spirit act like this? Following this, everyone came to the palace. The woman let go of the river god's arm and retreated to the side. They had a very good relationship in private, but as a godly spirit, she had to maintain her dignity and could not be too close. Seeing that so many people had arrived, the river god announced, "I've decided to submit to the Pantheon Palace and become its godly spirit. I'll also hand over my faction to the Pantheon Palace." Everyone present went into an uproar. No one had expected the river god to say such a thing. When the Pantheon Palace had invited various godly spirits to join it, everyone thought that the godly spirit would lower his status and power and be restricted to join such a faction. No godly spirit would be so stupid. However, they had heard the godly spirit they believed in say such a thing. They simply could not believe it. It seemed that the river god had not intended to join them at all yesterday. How could he have made such an important decision in just one night? Everyone was puzzled by this. The woman next to him also looked quite confused and could not understand why the river god had given such an order. However, thinking about the river god's words, she suddenly understood something. The bastard that the river god had mentioned was most likely someone for the Pantheon Palace, and he had used some method to make the river god submit to the Pantheon Palace last night. A middle-aged man with a beard asked, "Why does Lord River God want to join the Pantheon Palace? Isn't our faction doing quite well now? If we join the Pantheon Palace, the river god's faction will no longer exist." You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.